Chapter 2340 Powerful Physique. Chapter 2340 Powerful Physique. Upon witnessing this, everyone felt numb with shock. Was this not astounding? To rival an 11th Leaf Monarch star without using the power of regulations? Was this a joke? Regulations were the foundation of one's battle prowess. Even if one were an 18th Lotus Ancestral King, if they didn't wield regulations, their battle prowess would only be equivalent to that of 6th Lotus cultivators. This was one of the main reasons why the foreign realms still hadn't been able to conquer the celestial realm after so long. Every single elite had to face the issue of exhausting the power of regulations. If they couldn't achieve speedy victory, they would have no option but to retreat. Otherwise, they would be seeking death. Now, however, Ling Han was relying on his physical power alone to rival Sun Ping. If this could be promoted, the foreign realm would no longer have any worries when fighting the celestial realm. Not only could they venture deep into the celestial realm, but after conquering the latter, they could even gain an advantage when invading other realms. They could transform enemy grounds into home grounds. At this moment, everyone forgot Ling Han's past arrogance and rebellious behavior. He was a profound treasure. Only the ancestral king shook his head. He had already understood the situation. It was most likely Ling Han who had triggered the heavenly venerate tribulation just then. This was because he had somehow grasped a wisp of power of heaven and earth, resulting in him being targeted by a tribulation. However, he clearly hadn't succeeded. In fact, it was impossible for him to succeed. After all, a measly 8th Lotus cultivator had no right to grasp the power of heaven and earth. In the view of this ancestral king, Ling Han had most likely ingested some kind of mystical matter of heaven and earth, accidentally absorbing some power of heaven and earth. This had then triggered the heavenly tribulation. Meanwhile, Ling Han was tempered by the power of heaven and earth, allowing him to gain a wisp of the might of heaven and earth. The power of heaven and earth was the foundation of all matter. It was naturally transcendent above regulations, so was it strange that it could rival the power of regulations. Of course, if Ling Han's physique hadn't already advanced to the ascending origin tier, the tempering of the void particle energy wouldn't have had such great effect. This was a miraculous event that couldn't be replicated. The longer Sun Ping fought, the more flustered he became. His opponent clearly wasn't using the power of regulations. However, he could easily block all of his attacks, and he wasn't falling into a disadvantage either. That being the case, just how terrifying would he be if he unleashed his true strength? This thought was not unique to him. Everyone else was thinking the same thing. For example, Huai Jian, Su Xing, Jing Zhongyue, and Shui Ge all wore solemn expressions as they looked at Ling Han. This was especially the case with Jing Zhongyue. She had fought against Ling Han before, and neither of them had unleashed their most powerful attacks at that time. However, they had still been able to sense each other's power. It was because of this that they had eagerly anticipated a rematch during the ranking battles for the elite leaderboard. Now, however, she suddenly realized that Ling Han had only revealed a sliver of his power. This demon. Just what was his extreme? After exchanging a further 100 or so strikes, Ling Han shook his head, and finally came to his senses. He truly couldn't recall how he had achieved that. Perhaps he was better off teaching those formulas and models to Hu Niu and the others. At that time, they could rack their brains together. Moreover, once they succeeded, their battle prowess would soar in leaps and bounds. In fact, they might even forge a new and powerful path of cultivation, allowing one to avoid regulations and directly draw on the power of heaven and earth. As he mulled over this, he didn't forget to throw a punch. Pun! He struck Sun Ping square in the face. Sun Ping involuntarily stumbled back. Pa! After taking 2 steps, he couldn't help but collapse to the ground. It was as if his soul had been beaten from his body. He couldn't control his body at all. Victory to Ba! The judge loudly announced. Sun Ping was dispirited as he left the arena. He had lost to Yu Yuan in the previous tournament, and he had lost to Ling Han now. Perhaps the 100 Battles Academy was his nemesis. Moreover, Yu Yuan had only been slightly more powerful than him. With a bit of hard work, he could have still surpassed Yu Yuan. However, Ling Han's power was unfathomable and unreachable. Just like Huai Jian, he was lofty and paramount. Sin Ping could only gaze up in reverence. Ling Han fought another battle, and he naturally advanced to the top 32 with 2 victories to his name. He was allowed to rest for another 5 days. When he returned, he immediately called all of his wives and partners over, detailing his experience. They were all delighted by what they heard. Because of their aptitude, the cultivation speed of Lu Yutong, Li Sikan, and the others was extremely slow. Even after using ancestral king blood, their cultivation speed was only slightly quicker than that of Emperor Tiers. However, if there were another avenue to increase their cultivation, perhaps they could even become heavenly venerates in the future. Thus, this was naturally terrific news. Of course, only a single mysterious scroll remained. How long it could be used for was still an unknown matter. They started to comprehend the formulas and models day and night. However, while these formulas were complex and difficult to understand, so even the progress of monarch stars such as the Empress and Hunyo was extremely slow. It was very likely that they wouldn't make any discoveries in the short term. Anyhow, the Empress and Hunyo both had extremely clear goals. They would advance to the 11th secret before they focused their attention on investigating the void particle energy. Meanwhile, Bewitching Maiden Ro was also intent on advancing to the ascending origin tier. She wanted to become the first ascending origin tier elite among them. Thus, her focus wasn't on investigating the void particle energy either. Ling Han was extremely happy about the 3 women's persistence. Cultivators needed to have their own goals. Only then could they soar to greater heights. In the following 5 days, Ling Han was still unable to make any progress. Meanwhile, the ranking battles had already entered the round of 32. Just like before, the member of the group who won twice would advance, while the member who lost twice would be eliminated. With Ling Han's strength, he naturally won his 2 battles with ease, advancing to the round of 16. Of the 16 initial seeds, only 1 had failed to advance. This was because he had come across a powerful opponent in the round of 64. He had suffered severe wounds even though he had achieved victory. As such, 5 days hadn't been enough time for him to recover. During the round of 32, he had thus been eliminated by another powerful opponent. Starting from the round of 16, the competition format would become single elimination battles. Each person would only have a single chance. Ling Han's first opponent was Mo, the monarch star ranking 2nd in the previous tournament. He was a holy beast, a member of the wolf tribe, and was covered in long silver fur, with his tail in the shape of a powerful dragon. This tail was sturdy and ferocious, and as it whipped around, it could even shatter the surrounding space, creating a void. He had shot to fame long ago, and he had already topped the elite leaderboard before Huai Jian's arrival. Moreover, it was clear that he didn't intend to advance to the ascending origin tier. It was as if he wanted to remain at this cultivation level forever, becoming the person to top the elite leaderboard the most times in history. Of course, this was only the speculation of other people. In reality, he was only delaying his advance because he was unsatisfied with his foundation. He wanted to temper it even further. He stood straight before Ling Han, and it was as if he were a notched and ready arrow. "Bah, I finally have the opportunity to battle you," he said. His voice boomed like raging thunder. However, Ling Han couldn't help but find this to be a shame. This holy beast was definitely a nutritious delicacy. But how could he kill this wolf and draw him into the Black Tower under the watchful gazes of so many people? "Nyo wants to eat meat!" Hunyo shouted from the sidelines. She was giving Ling Han a reminder. Ling Han couldn't help but sigh. He glanced at Mo's leg and said, "How about we make a deal? Can you sell me a leg? I promise I won't eat it. I'll only use it for research." And Mo was instantly enraged. "You won't eat it? Your eyes are almost gleaming as you stare at me. Drool is almost dripping from your mouth. Whom are you trying to kid? You dare to belittle me? You're taking things too far." The wolf lashed out in rage, with an ancient symbol materializing on his forehead. An astonishing aura swept forth, as devastating as could be. According to rumors, Mo once received guidance from a heavenly venerate. That's right. This symbol on his forehead was bestowed by that heavenly venerate. TSK. Receiving guidance from a heavenly venerate. No wonder he was able to come second on the elite leaderboard. Anyone can win this battle. The spectators were all engaged in spirited discussions. Chapter 2341 Mastered. Chapter 2341 Mastered. However, Ling Han felt completely indifferent. At the same cultivation level, monarch stars were already unable to pique his interest. His strength had already exceeded the level of monarch stars. He had advanced to a higher level. The foreign realm didn't have a name for this level. However, they did indeed have prodigies at this level. For example, Huai Jian, Jingzhongyue, Su Xing, and Shuige. Casting his gaze across to the celestial realm, Ling Han reckoned that Ji Wuming could somewhat count as a prodigy at this level. However, judging from what he had seen, Ji Wuming was actually still a little bit off. After all, the level of heaven and earth was different. In any case, if the Empress and Hun Yo could grasp the void particle energy, no, they didn't need to grasp it. As long as they could extract void particle energy to temper themselves, they could definitely increase their battle prowess by a significant amount. They could reach an evolution index of 11. Ling Han casually threw a punch. Even though he didn't unleash his full power, he was still able to easily suppress Mo. In just a few dozen exchanges, he had already gained a comprehensive upper hand. He then obtained an easy victory, advancing to the quarterfinals. As for Mo, the prodigy who had placed second on the previous elite leaderboard, he could only place ninth at best this time. One day passed, and the top 8 cultivators were all locked in. The supreme monarch stars such as Huai Jian and the others were naturally among these 8 people. Right now, Ling Han, Huai Jian, Su Xing, Jing Zhongyue, and Shui Gu were the fancies to take out the title of strongest. This was a grand level of competition that had never been seen before. Such a great number of supreme prodigies had actually risen together. However, in the next round, 2 supreme monarch stars would definitely come face to face. This also signified the elimination of a supreme monarch star. Who would it be? They completed another draw to decide the battles. In the end, it was Su Xing and Shui Gu who suffered the misfortune of having to battle against each other. One of them would be eliminated. Like before, they were allowed to rest for another 5 days. Everyone was filled with eager anticipation. They could finally witness a battle between 2 supreme monarch stars. Even though several supreme monarch stars had clashed before, they had done so in the team battles. Moreover, they had been subject to numerous restrictions. However, the individual ranking battles for the elite leaderboard were different. Firstly, there was no time restriction. Secondly, there was no technique restriction, and they were allowed to unleash any technique without worrying about killing others. There was an ancestral king watching over them, so he would prevent anyone from being killed. Ling Han researched and investigated until he became dazed and silly again. When the 6th day arrived, he was feeling completely muddle-headed and confused. However, it was also at this moment that he suddenly felt a vast and profound energy entering his body. Void particle energy. This time, he immediately came to his senses. Crack! Heaven and earth boomed in reply, with thunderclouds rapidly gathering overhead. Ling Han didn't stop immediately. Instead, he committed his current state to memory, and only then did he rapidly stop his actions. He allowed the void particle energy to circulate around his body several times, elevating his technique. Only then did he disperse this energy. Having lost its target, heavenly tribulation also started to slowly dissipate. Ling Han had been well prepared this time, and he had made sure to cultivate in seclusion outside the academy. Otherwise, no one would dare to stay in the Four Splendor Academy anymore. After all, the situation would be far too dangerous, with heavenly venerate tribulations rolling over at any time. Who could endure this? He slowly returned to the academy. As he made his way over, he continued to replay the past few days in his mind. So that's how it is! He came to a sudden realization. Even though there were formulas and models to learn and apply when it came to extracting void particle energy, the true method was one that could only be understood and not spoken. If Ling Han hadn't become a ruler of heaven and earth before, he definitely couldn't have extracted void particle energy at this cultivation level. He couldn't have done so even with the help of that unopenable scroll. He had only failed so many times before because he hadn't been a genuine ruler of heaven and earth. At that time, he had only possessed the strength of a pseudo-heavenly venerate. In other words, he had only just been powerful enough to interact with the power of heaven and earth. Elevating one's physical power is much easier than elevating one's grasp of regulations. As long as I raise my power to the pinnacle level of the ascending origin tier, my battle prowess will be equivalent to that of someone at the consummate level of the ascending origin tier, Ling Han murmured to himself. However, it was a pity that physical power was a set form of strength. A certain amount of power would always correspond to a certain level of battle prowess. This was unlike cultivation levels, where the battle prowess of monarch stars different from their cultivation. So that's why Wally uses the vitality index and not cultivation level to measure a living being's strength. Nurin. As Ling Han murmured to himself, he had already arrived back at the academy. He prepared to take part in the quarterfinals. The first 3 battles didn't spring any surprises. Ling Han, Huai Jian, and Jing Zhongyue all successfully advanced. Meanwhile, the eagerly anticipated 4th battle was proceeding with vigor and ferocity. The 2 supreme monarch stars were both unleashing their astonishing battle prowess, producing a brilliant and enthralling battle. Either of them held back. Their strength was almost identical, so the battle between them was naturally as intense as could be. They were unable to determine a victor no matter what. They continued to exhaust each other's stamina. Fortunately, such situations had occurred before, so the hosts were naturally able to resolve the situation. The solution was to activate a time acceleration mechanism. 1 day in the outside world would equal 3 years in time acceleration mechanism. Su Xing and Shuai were truly as evenly matched as could be. Only after battling for a whopping 17 years did they finally determine a victor. Moreover, this was only because they were prohibited from using weapons. As a member of the insect race, Shuai gained a slim advantage as the hooks on his body were naturally powerful weapons. During ordinary times, these hooks wouldn't give him any advantage at all. However, in this kind of evenly matched battle, this extremely slim advantage was able to give him an edge that became increasingly magnified as time went on. Su Xing was naturally unresigned to defeat. He was skilled in many powerful techniques that could only be performed with weapons. Thus, the 2 of them had already arranged to battle again. In any case, Shuai was the final member to advance to the semi-final. In the next round, Ling Han would face Jing Zhongyue, and Huai Jian would face Shuai. They were again given 5 days to rest. Ling Han didn't waste a single second. He ventured into the wilderness, and started to extract the power of heaven and earth from the mysterious scroll. He continued to walk the fine line between life and death. If he messed up just a little bit, heavenly tribulation would descend without any shred of mercy. At that time, how could his frail body withstand it? Flee into the Black Tower? Indeed, 9th Heaven celestial kings were unable to breach the Black Tower's defenses. However, the tribulation of heaven and earth would never disappear. As long as Ling Han dared to reappear, the tribulation of heaven and earth would continue to form and descend until he chose to face it head-on. However, that would naturally be an act of seeking death. Of course, there was still another option. Ling Han could leave the foreign realm. However, there was no path to return to the celestial realm, and he hadn't grasped the regulations of the dark inverse realm either. As such, he could only remain in the foreign realm. Ling Han was playing with fire, yet this allowed his battle prowess to rise steadily. His physical power had already reached the great accomplishment of the ascending origin tier. Add to that the tempering that his physique had received from heaven and earth, and he could unleash a battle prowess at the great accomplishment of the ascending origin tier even without drawing on the power of regulations. Moreover, this battle prowess wouldn't be affected by the dimension that he was in. Even if he went to the dark inverse realm, or an even higher level dimension, he would still maintain a battle prowess at the great accomplishment of the ascending origin tier, even though he wouldn't be able to wield the power of local regulations. No wonder heavenly venerates are so terrifying. They've already transcended regulations, so their battle prowess won't be weakened no matter where they go. The 5 days passed by in a flash. The semi-finals began, and the two battles were held in unison. Ling Han faced off against Jing Zhongyue. His opponent was graceful and ethereal in her beauty. She was like a celestial maiden who could only be appreciated from afar. One wouldn't dare bear to near her. "I've been waiting for this day," Jing Zhongyue said. Her voice was crisp and pleasant to the ear. Listening to her was a great enjoyment. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Please go ahead. I won't hold back just because you're a woman." Jing Zhongyue was enraged upon hearing this. She was a supreme monarch star, so did she need others to hold back just because she was a woman? She was a peerless sword that could obliterate all matter. "Myriad forms sword technique," she said with a humph. She made a pushing motion with her slender hands, unleashing countless silver swords. These swords violently swept toward Ling Han. "Say, girl, can't we fight properly?" Ling Han said with a smile. He resolutely charged forward, swinging his fists and shattering the silver swords. He was like a demon lord as he arrived before Jing Zhongyue. Chapter 2342 Limit. Chapter 2342 Limit. In everyone's eyes, Ling Han was quite suspected of having taken liberties with Jing Zhongyue. It could not be helped. One was a dark guy from the demon race, while the other was a fair lady from the angel race. The two of them standing together would just be like a beauty and a beast. Now that Ling Han had teased her verbally, in the eyes of the masses, that looked to be taking liberties with her. Jing Zhongyue's delicate face turned cold, and she attacked continuously. One after another, her attacks turned into harsh sword chi. She was like a goddess of war, beautiful and dangerous, lovely yet heroic. Even the males of the demon race, insect race, and holy beasts could not turn their eyes from her, their expressions captivated. If the result of this battle was decided by the spectators, the victor would doubtlessly be Jing Zhongyue. Ling Han put his all into the battle. His evolution index had already reached 11, and there should be no further room for improvement under present conditions. However, if he battled with an elite like Jing Zhongyue, who knew, he might be able to break through his shackles and set out on a stronger path of evolution. He used various kinds of regulations easily and freely, turning them into the forms of various weapons that sliced out at Jing Zhongyue or wrapped around his fists as he attacked Jing Zhongyue directly. His tough physique was already very useful at this point. He could ignore the majority of Jing Zhongyue's attacks, and this allowed him to spare even more energy to use on his own attacks. As a result, Jing Zhongyue's attacks became fewer. Instead, it was his attacks that became even more frantic. From the bigger picture, Ling Han had already taken the upper hand. Basically, it was only him that was on the offensive. However, both he and Jing Zhongyue knew that the battle was far from reaching the point when the victor would be decided. While Jing Zhongyue's rate of attacks had decreased, the force of her attacks had increased. She would either choose not to attack, or if she did, that would be the harshest of attacks, and even Ling Han did not dare to treat her attacks lightly. However, as the battle continued, Ling Han became more and more proficient. His cultivation level had increased very quickly, but he had been in too few battles. When he was faced with monarch tiers, or even monarch stars, this was no big issue, but Jing Zhongyue was too strong. His attacks only had to expose the slightest weakness, and the woman would be able to take the chance to parry, calmly evade, or launch a rain of counterattacks. This forced Ling Han to continuously improve so that the weaknesses he would expose became fewer and fewer, pushing closer and closer to perfection. The stronger he was, the greater Jing Zhongyue's predicament would naturally be. Her counters further decreased, and she finally revealed an expression of shock. If this continued, she would lose. Lose? In a battle of equals, she had never considered the possibility that she would be defeated. This was a word that practically had no relation to her at all, yet it had now appeared in her mind. She was defiant. She was already a supreme monarch star, so why was it that she was still no match for Ling Han? It had to be because she had not used her weapon. She concluded that the reason lay here. She had a 9th Lotus-level precious tool, and it could sustain an explosion of battle prowess that surpassed her cultivation level from her. But now that she was using her fingers as replacement for her sword, how could her physique hold up to the blazing of such great power? Her fingers would definitely explode into bits first before she even launched the attack. The circumstances of her defeat became more and more apparent, and she had no intention to make her defeat too bad. She decisively extracted herself from the battle, and declared, "I have lost." Ling Han was dissatisfied. He felt that his battle prowess still had some room for improvement, and couldn't help but ask, "Why don't we have another spar at my place?" When Jing Zhongyue heard this, her delicate face immediately flushed, and after a soft rebuke as she said, "Scum!" she left swiftly. Go to his place to have a spar? No matter how it sounded, these words were ambiguous. The spectators, especially Jing Zhongyue's admirers, were all outraged, wanting nothing more than to pummel this outrageously brazen guy into mush. He was too shameless, too despicable, and too direct. Ling Han was baffled. He clearly was very solemnly inviting her for another battle, not a date, so why were they reacting so strongly? Ba's victory! As the referee's words fell, Ling Han also left the battle stage. As for who exactly would emerge victorious between Huai Jian and Shui Ge, Ling Han was completely unconcerned. In any case, no matter who won, they would not be able to stop him from attaining the pinnacle for the sake of the egg of the primordial battle beast. He took the time to continue tempering himself, but soon discovered that he had reached a bottleneck. His power had stopped at the pinnacle of great accomplishment of the ascending origin tier, and he could not take another step further. From the look of things, his cultivation level had still affected the upper limit of his power. He could only come back again after he broke through. The battle between Huai Jian and Shui Ge had just concluded, and ultimately, the rookie prodigy had not managed to put on a show of a splendid counterattack. Huai Jian was slightly superior, and obtained the victory in the battle. However, both had paid a very terrible price. That ancestral king of the Four Splendor Academy spoke up, and announced that the final battle would be delayed for a month. There had never been previous cases of this happening before, but that ancestral king said that it was so that the two great monarch stars could fight at their greatest brilliance, and the reason was very honorable. But everyone knew that Huai Jian was about to be taken as a disciple by a heavenly venerate. The first prize of the elite leaderboard was specifically arranged for him, so it had to be guaranteed that he would become champion no matter what, or it would displease that heavenly venerate. Who would dare to displease a heavenly venerable tier? Ling Han was not concerned. He, too, wanted to battle Huai Jian when the latter was in his strongest state so that he could accelerate the stabilization of his cultivation level. Only then would he be able to break through to the ascending origin tier as soon as possible. After advancing into the ascending origin tier, being tempered by the source power of heaven and earth, would he then be able to match celestial kings? It did not have to be the 8th heaven or 9th heaven. He would be satisfied with just matching 1st heaven. Ling Han thought that he was thinking about it very modestly, yet did not know that if his thoughts were known to others, they would definitely say that he was deluded. What kind of existence were celestial kings? They were on the same level as regulations, and even the strongest ascending origin tier monarch star could not possibly breach the gulf between ascending origin tier and celestial king tier. This was absolute, and there was no exception. Yet Ling Han did not think so. The power of heaven and earth was superior to the power of regulations. He did have a chance of possessing battle prowess that could match celestial king tier at the ascending origin tier. Let's just wait and see. He did not continue to cultivate, but rather began to concoct alchemical pills. He was just a sliver away from achieving the 9th refinement. He only had to advance into this level, and he would be able to become a 5-star alchemist, being able to first advance into the level of celestial king tier in a certain aspect. A dozen or so days later, good news was heard. Both Hu Niu and the Empress had broken through to the 11th secret, and possessed the strongest battle prowess of the immortal palace tier. However, bewitching Maiden Ro had still not managed to break through. Even if she had as much ancestral king blood and celestial pills at her disposal, how could this step called ascending origin tier be so easily taken? Origin power had to be converted into source power. What about source power? The source power of heaven and earth had drawn even closer to the level of regulations, which naturally was hard to attain. Another 7 days later, Huai Jian had already recovered from all his wounds, and returned to the pinnacle of his battle prowess. Hence, that ancestral king issued a command that the deciding battle was to begin. This naturally was extremely unjust, and was incredibly partial to Huai Jian. Why was it that the battle was to begin once he was ready? What if Ling Han was still breaking through to some extremely crucial stage? It could not be helped. There was a heavenly venerate standing behind Huai Jian, so who could not be biased in his favor? Thus, the deciding battle began a few days ahead of time again after being delayed for over a dozen days. Ling Han came with Hu Niu and the other women. Qi Shuang, Yuan, and the others had long since been waiting there. This battle had powerful implications. If Ling Han could win, then even if the 100 Battles Academy did not get the first place in the rankings of academies, they could still be proud, and would be looked on highly by everyone. Qi Shuang and Yuan did not offer Ling Han any words of encouragement. They knew that he was fighting for himself here, and he would definitely strive to the best of his efforts. Ultimately, just who was the strongest monarch star between Ling Han and Huai Jian? Chapter 2343 Ling Han vs. Huai Jian. Chapter 2343 Ling Han vs. Huai Jian. The final battle was about to begin, Ling Han vs. Huai Jian. The seats were filled with spectators. Not only had many great sects and powerful clans come, even supreme monarch stars like Shui Ge and Jing Zhongyue were all present. They naturally hoped that the one who had defeated them could win. That way, they would know that they were just a slight sliver away from becoming the champion. This kind of mentality was actually very common. It was fine if I lost to you, but you couldn't lose to anyone else. That would make me seem too incapable. The ancestral king of the Four Splendor Academy had also come personally instead of just sending a thought which manifested into human form like before. He spoke a few words, encouraging everyone to work hard on their cultivation so that they could possibly become supreme monarch stars like Ling Han and Huai Jian. Though everyone knew that this was an impossible feat, they still applauded strongly. They had to give some face to an ancestral king, after all. Finally, the prize for the victor was also taken out, an egg about the size of a human head. It was placed on a bed of crimson satin. The whole egg was golden and covered with multiple vein patterns of purple. Upon closer look, these vein patterns were slightly moving, as if it was breathing. The egg of the primordial battle beast. Practically everyone turned their eyes to it. That was an existence that was fated to become an ancestral king. If they could obtain it, they would have a beast pet that was at the ancestral king tier by their side. Merely the level of flashiness was already off the charts. What more the awesomeness of having an ancestral king as their follower? Too bad, it was going to belong to either Huai Jian or Ling Han. It must be Huai Jian's, no questions asked? That's right. An ancestral king obtained it, but was still unable to have it recognize him as its master through blood. Instead, he set it out as a prize. It has all been decided behind closed doors that it would definitely be awarded to Huai Jian. Unless Ba also has a heavenly venerate backing him up. If he knows what's good for him, he will choose to surrender readily. Everyone was discussing spiritedly, filled with envy. To say nothing of them, even Jing Zhongyue, Shui Ge, and the others bore heated eyes. This kind of ancestral, king-tier precious treasure was something even they were incredibly tempted by. Begin, that ancestral king said. Huai Jian clasped his hands behind his back, his expression gentle as he said, I have seen you fight before. You are indeed very strong, but there is still a certain distance between you and me. This is not because your natural talent is inferior, but rather that you have advanced into 11th leaf too late, and have not reached a level of perfection in the way you use your own power. He paused, Just forfeit. When everyone heard this, they all bore impressed expressions of admiration. Huai Jian had always been cordial to others, but he was filled with inner pride. It was clear from just these words. He was filled with confidence, and was sure of his own victory. There was absolutely no way that Ling Han could be a match for him, but it was not that he was completely self-centered either. He pointed out why Ling Han was not a match for him, exhibiting fully his dominance as the top monarch star. Ling Han chuckled and replied, I have always been best at finding my own weaknesses in battle to improve myself. It is rare that I would have such a good opportunity, so please offer your guidance, brother Huai Jian. Huai Jian was still all smiles, but his expression now carried a sliver of coldness. He had the ambition of conquering the world, and wished to create an empire that had never been seen before by turning around and attacking the Xian and I realm after he became a heavenly venerate. He wanted to build his own force, and those like Ling Han and Jing Zhongyue were all targets that he wished to recruit. Ling Han was his first target. Huai Jian was going to use his own domineering demeanor to make the former submit to his authority. And now, Ling Han's reaction displeased him greatly. That was fine. He could beat Ling Han's pride into submission. All right then, let's have a spar, Huai Jian said smilingly. The wings behind him flapped, and his whole body emanated a golden brilliance that was extremely dazzling. It was as if he had turned into a god of war in golden armor, and others could not help but want to kneel down at his feet in worship. This was regulations of light, which had the effect of entrancing the hearts and drumming up morale. If this kind of secret technique was used on one's own troops in battle, everyone would be energized, and kill their enemies with no concern for themselves. Here, Huai Jian naturally could not possibly be drumming up Ling Han's fighting spirit. Instead, he was just showing how strong he was. Where the light radiated, visibility and divine sense would all be restrained, and in fact one would even become blind. Ling Han similarly channeled the regulation of darkness, but he was not a true member of the demon race, so he did not have any special natural talent in the manipulation of regulation of darkness. Thus, he merely spread out the darkness in a small zone, forcing the light out in a range of about 30 meters. In comparison, Huai Jian had control of an entire 5 kilometers. It was like Ling Han was a helpless child that was in the shadow cast by a giant. Divine Sword of Light! Huai Jian exclaimed lightly. Xiao, 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 millions of divine swords shot out all at once, shooting from various angles, and blasting towards Ling Han together. It was clear that he had sensed that Ling Han's physique was extraordinarily tough, and as they were not allowed weapons in this kind of battle, he gave up the idea of a battle at close quarters. Instead, he launched a long-range attack. Ling Han shot out a punch. Pung, 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 the regulation of slaughter unfolded, surging out of the zone of darkness. A boundless killing intent struck, instantly shattering the attack of light into smithereens. If anyone was even touched, they would definitely be driven into madness. This killing intent was too terrifying. The divine sword of light immediately shattered completely, and the zone of light also shrunk, decreasing from a diameter of 5 kilometers to 5 kilometers, but it still had the absolute upper hand. Regulation of slaughter? Huai Jian was surprised. Members of angel race like him, or the demon race, were all born with fortune because they had an affinity with the regulation of darkness or light by nature, so when they cultivated, it would be twice the result with half the effort. Thus, it was basically that the regulation that every member of the angel race or demon race was the most skilled in was definitely the regulation of either darkness or light. Yet Ling Han's accomplishment in the regulation of darkness was actually inferior to his accomplishment in the regulation of slaughter. This guy was really too willful, wasn't he? It was not that you couldn't cultivate other regulations, but no matter what, you had to push the level of regulation of darkness to the limits of your present cultivation level first before you proceeded to study other regulations, right? Wasn't this just putting the cart before the horse? The results of unbridled greed! Huai Jian rebuked, and flicked out a finger. Instantly, light condensed, turning into a massive spear that was as long as 300 meters. The body of the spear was covered with seals of light. "Go!" he exclaimed lightly. The divine spear of light shot out, blasting towards Ling Han. In the zone of light, its speed was high to an extreme extent. In a flash, it had already drawn close to the zone enshrouded by the regulation of darkness, and only then did it slow down. But because this zone was really too small, the divine spear pierced through this barrier in an instant, and arrived inside the zone of darkness before further slowing down. The whole process took no more than a millionth of a microsecond, and the tip of the spear had already drawn close to Ling Han's face. In fact, it was even visible that even the skin on Ling Han's face was rippling because of the murderous aura borne by the spear's tip. It was at this moment that Ling Han moved, even faster than lightning. "Pa!" He immediately got hold of the spear's tip. Huai Jian was unworried, and exclaimed lightly, "Explode!" The whole divine spear of light immediately exploded. Boom! The seals turned into an ocean, bearing incredibly terrifying destructive power. Everyone shook their head. The gap between Ling Han and Huai Jian was really too vast. In just 2 to 3 moves, the former was already out of the running. However, a strange scene appeared. An explosion actually occurred in the zone of light as well, and its scope was becoming larger and larger. Finally, the explosion in the zone of darkness had completely vanished, and Ling Han was seen standing proudly, completely unscathed. Regulations of space! Huai Jian's brow creased into a frown. Chapter 2344 Exchange of Blows. Chapter 2344 Exchange of Blows. Just now, it seemed as if Ling Han had been dragged into the explosion caused by the divine spear, but in truth, he had diverted the power of the explosion into the zone of light through regulations of space so that the spear and the shield would cancel each other out. Huai Jian was stunned. How was it that Ling Han had a grasp of so many different regulations? For prodigies like them, their cultivation level would advance rapidly, and it was as simple as drinking water for them to overcome the so-called barrier between cultivation levels. Hence, what time would they have left to cultivate other regulations? Merely cultivating one kind of regulation was already enough, and the real key was advancing their cultivation level. Without an adequately high cultivation level, so what if you were an 8th Lotus Monarch star? Faced with a 9th Lotus 2nd leaf or 3rd leaf, you would still lose. Only after becoming an ancestral king, when you could not possibly advance swiftly no matter how prodigious you were, would you then proceed to cultivate other regulations. Firstly, because you could comprehend new regulations through analogy, and obtain inspiration for breakthroughs, and secondly, it was so you could increase your own strength. Someone like Ling Han was completely ignoring his proper duties. Ling Han cracked a grin. "It is against etiquette not to respond in kind, so you should take a punch from me as well." He shot out a punch. Boom! Space was compressed, folding down on itself as he launched his attack on Huai Jian. This punch was not just merely a counterattack, but also further pushed the zone under Ling Han's control another 0.5 kilometers forwards. Huai Jian humphed, his right hand making a pulling motion. Instantly, a boundless brilliance emerged, greeting the shattered space that was approaching him. Boom! This counter from Ling Han had been blocked. Just a slight exposure of the strength of the two great prodigies was world-shaking. Everyone was curious. At the beginning, Ling Han had definitely been at an absolute disadvantage in terms of height of regulations, yet now he was slowly countering, turning the advantage and disadvantage ratio between the two of them into 8-2. Though he was still at a disadvantage, he had already recouped who knew how much from the previously completely one-sided situation. More importantly, who knew if Ling Han had other regulations that he had yet to channel? Huai Jian's arms shook, and divine swords of light instantly extended from his fists. They were completely manifested from regulations. No one would dare to use any kind of precious tool here. He charged out, bringing with him endless light, and launching a powerful assault on Ling Han. After a few instances of testing the waters, he realized that merely depending on long-range attacks could not possibly allow him to defeat Ling Han. That would give Ling Han enough time to react. Only a battle at close quarters would pose a real threat to Ling Han. Ling Han released a battle cry, using fists of fury to greet the oncoming attack. The two great prodigies clashed, one enshrouded in light like he was a god of war, while the other was enshrouded in the three regulations of slaughter, space, and darkness, as if he was a great demon king planning to wreak havoc on the world. The more regulations one had grasped, the stronger their battle prowess would indeed be, but it was definitely not just simple addition, but rather was far from this number. For example, if the might of the regulation of slaughter was 1, and the might of the regulations of space was also 1, then with the simultaneous channeling of two regulations, the might that could be unleashed would only be 1, 2 or 1, 3. This was also why everyone would concentrate on one specific type of regulations, because they would indeed be biting off more than they could chew otherwise. Huai Jian had focused on the regulation of light, cultivating this regulation to an astonishing height. His whole body was covered in interwoven light, possessing terrifying battle prowess, and completely beating down on Ling Han. Even with the compound effect of three regulations added together, Ling Han was still not a match from him. Ling Han did not panic. Was this his limit? Of course not. He channeled another kind of regulation. Endless lightning stretched out, and his battle prowess further increased. Correspondingly, the zone of light was further compressed by about another 0.5 kilometers. Now, it was a ratio of 7-3. Everyone was exclaiming continuously in shock. Ling Han had indeed grasped other regulations. 3 types of regulations was actually not his limit. 4 should be about it, right? No matter how many different types of regulations you have grasped, in front of me, everything is pointless, Huai Jian declared proudly. His hands pressed down on empty air, and boom, a divine sword of light instantly appeared in the skies, crashing down heavily on Ling Han. Ling Han laughed loudly, and the 5th type of regulation was unleashed by him. This time, it was the regulations of metal, exuding an eerie air of sharpness on his fists. Pun! Ling Han's punch shot out, and the divine sword of light instantly exploded into bits. Golden light spread out, and the zone of light was shrunk further, reduced to 3 kilometers in diameter. It was close to an even match now. Everyone was already rendered speechless. Just how many regulations had Ling Han grasped? Huai Jian was also speechless. What he had said were words merely spoken in a moment of anger. Who would have expected that Ling Han really had grasped even more regulations, which made him feel troubled. With every additional regulation that Ling Han used, he would become stronger in terms of regulations, but there was actually not much boost to his battle prowess. However, Huai Jian had to guard against the scenario that Ling Han really had grasped all kinds of regulations. That quantitative change would form a qualitative change, which would be enough to match Huai Jian. Ling Han used Fists of Fury, and began a powerful counterattack. When he used the regulations of wood, the zone of light only occupied half the territory. At least from the bigger picture, Ling Han was no longer at a disadvantage. And when more regulations were channeled, it was the zone of light that was now being suppressed. Finally, it was only left with a diameter of around 30 meters, just like how Ling Han had once been. This was really a turnaround. Everyone was speechless. Who would actually believe this scene? Though the battle had not yet been decided, merely in terms of situation, Ling Han had already gotten an absolute advantage. Of course, Huai Jian definitely could not be considered as having lost. Just like how Ling Han had been at a disadvantage in the circumstances previously, yet was still unafraid of Huai Jian, it was the same now. Huai Jian was extremely stunned. Ling Han had actually grasped the 5 elements: lightning, slaughter, darkness, and space, a total of 9 types of regulations. How could he have so much energy? This thought merely flashed past in his mind. He immediately burst out with his full power, charging out to attack Ling Han. The two great prodigies exchanged blows, with ultimate moves used in quick succession. They were both showing their own brilliance. Ling Han still had an ultimate move he had not used, such as the regulations of time. This could win him the battle and turn the tables around, and he was sure that it was the same for Huai Jian. This man was a prodigy that would be rare to come by even in an epic, and had even gained the favor of a great many ancestral kings, who thought that he had a great chance of becoming a heavenly venerate. To say that this kind of character did not have any powerful trump cards, who would actually believe that a sword descends from the heavens, destroying the spirit and severing the soul? As expected, Huai Jian soon used an ultimate move. A sword light streaked past, shaking the 9 heavens. This was a frighteningly powerful move. The sword struck out, and the regulation of light took solid form, appearing in the skies. It actually formed the shape of a seal, boosting the might of that sword light, and rapidly slashing out towards Ling. The 3 supreme monarch stars, Jing Zhongyue, Su Xing, and Su Xing, couldn't help but look stunned. If it were them that would be taking on this strike head-on, they would probably have to pay a very great price. Huai Jian was actually this strong. However, Huai Jian looked dissatisfied because this sword strike had been executed with his bare hands, and not that sword that he had been born with. Otherwise, the might could be further doubled. It was finally here. The fighting spirit in Ling Han's heart was already blazing like fire. He tapped out a finger, and everything stopped. Regulations of time. Huai Jian's expression changed drastically. Whatever the realm, the regulations of time were the most important, the most basic regulations. Without the regulations of time, this realm would be completely out of order, so how could any cultivation elites possibly emerge from this realm? Pun pun pun. Ling Han continued with a few more punches. The sword light instantly crumbled. The pillar that had been formed by the regulation of light also shattered, and the seal in the skies fell down subsequently, having lost its support. Chapter 2345 A Narrow Victory. Chapter 2345 A Narrow Victory. Huai Jian's expression was grim. Even against a prodigy like Shui Ge, he was still filled with confidence, and thought that he would definitely win, but now a bewilderment he had never experienced before rose up in him. He could no longer be certain. This kind of hesitation made him feel anxious. He, the top monarch star, was actually capable of feeling anxiety? But quickly afterwards, a strong fighting spirit rose up in his heart, surging out of the top of his head like flames, and soaring into the skies. This kind of battle was what he aspired for. Otherwise, if the result was clear from the get-go, the battle would only be a mere formality, and even his blood would be cooling down, which also caused him to behave gentle and refined, as if there was nothing in this world that could anger him. But very, very long ago, he had not been like this. He had been filled with passion and fighting spirit, longing to challenge powerful opponents. Before surpassing his opponents, he would have buried himself in cultivation, and that amazing feeling at the instant of victory could not be described. This was what a real battle was. This was the path of cultivation that he had walked, his original aspirations and yearning to become strong. Huai Jian laughed loudly, his aura majestic. It was like he had risen again from the ashes, his battle prowess actually increasing greatly. This was a change of his mental state, and caused him to be completely transformed. Actually, he had long since been able to advance into 9th Lotus, but firstly, he wanted to represent the Academy in this tournament, and secondly, he kept feeling that his condition had not reached perfection yet. Now that his mental state tensed and relaxed, he knew where the last sliver of his inadequacy lay. Once he fixed it, his battle prowess naturally reached consummate level. This kind of Huai Jian was too frightening. Every move he made could launch sword chi, and even as his eyes blinked, a pair of precious swords would leap out, slicing into the heaven and earth. Ling Han was stunned. He had not thought that such an astonishing change would occur in Huai Jian, but after his moment of surprise, he was only filled with fighting spirit. This kind of opponent was too rare. With a battle cry, Ling Han unleashed his full battle prowess, using various regulations with proficiency, and showing their amazing might to the maximum extent. This was not piling regulations on top of one another. When an attack approached, he would meet it with the regulation of earth that inclined towards defense, and when he attacked, regulations of slaughter and regulations of metal would move simultaneously. In terms of movement technique, the regulations of space naturally were unique and unmatched. In the use of regulations, Ling Han was already close to perfection. And under the pressure posed by a powerful enemy like Huai Jian, Ling Han was presently speeding towards perfection. Those watching outside were all amazed and entranced, and felt an impulse to grab their heads and exclaim in shock. Whether it was Huai Jian or Ling Han, this kind of prodigy should be unique and unrivaled, yet now two such prodigies had actually appeared. Would it be a relation of mutual hatred and friendship, and only one of the two could advance into heavenly venerable tier, or would they encourage each other, and both of them would eventually become heavenly venerates? The two people in the arena had already forgotten everything else, and were merely pouring all their efforts into battle. At this time, honor, prizes, and even victory had already been completely erased from their minds. There was only one word left in their minds: battle. Fight until they were completely exhausted, fight until even their bones shattered. The two great prodigies were showing their full brilliance, exuding the glory that belonged to them, and others were also paling in comparison. Only Shui Ge and the other Supreme Monarch stars were still filled with fighting spirit, swearing that they would surpass the two of them. The others were all mediocre in comparison, and even Monarch stars would feel a kind of helplessness. We fight, 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 and fight until the final bit of energy they had. Ling Han and Huai Jian were evenly matched. Even when time acceleration was started, 10 days had already passed outside, but they were still fighting intensely. This was a time acceleration of 1,000 times. 10 days outside were equivalent to more than 20 years inside. At first, the two great prodigies were fighting intensely, but now their speed was becoming lower and lower, with them only launching an attack after a long period of time. This was not because they were worn out, but rather that they had used all techniques at their disposal. Now, while they were fighting, they were pondering and scrambling their brains thinking of new moves to make. This was an even harder test of the two of them. If one's imagination, power of creation, and ability to react were slightly inferior, the battle would be decided in an instant. Now that they had battled to this point, the people outside were actually not so concerned about whether it would be Ling Han or Huai Jian winning anymore. The two had already proven their strength, and they were both undoubtedly the top two prodigies of the foreign realm, being capable of dazzling an era. Perhaps the two of them would each go to a battlefield after a few tens of billions of years, leading various prodigies. One side would conquer the celestial realm, while the other would be in charge of standing against the dark inverse realm. After over 20 years of intense battling, the two great prodigies were covered with various wounds. Though they had both grasped recovery skills with astonishing effects, this kind of rate of recovery was far from catching up because the battle was really too intense. At this time, Ling Han's tough physique was a very great advantage. The injuries he suffered were slightly lighter, and so his rate of recovery was slightly faster. Though it was just only by a little, but as it accumulated, this became an advantage, and was also becoming a winning situation. By the 13th day, after Huai Jian clashed with Ling Han again, his figure finally swayed as he flopped onto the ground, unable to battle any further. His injuries were too severe. Killing intent rose up in Ling Han's heart. Huai Jian was too frightening. In the future, he really could possibly become a heavenly venerate. To the celestial realm, this was definitely not good news. Ling Han had an impulse to directly kill him here and now, but firstly, he had developed an appreciation for the other party as another prodigy after battling for so long, and secondly, there was an ancestral king watching over, so there was no good chance to make a move. With this in mind, he slowly dismissed his killing intent. "Bah, victory!" The ancestral king spoke, his voice calm and without any sliver of fluctuation. It was practically an impossible feat to spy on the emotional changes of an ancestral king. The seal on the battlefield unlocked. Ling Han had not even walked out when he saw dense clouds spread out in the skies, with frightening lightning bolts flashing. Heavenly tribulation! He looked at Huai Jian in shock. This guy had broken through after this battle. He was really outrageously bold. This person's battle prowess actually was not inferior to his own. It was only his physique that was inferior, which ultimately resulted in a narrow loss. Of course, Ling Han had not used his stamina, either, and it was on the pinnacle level of great accomplishment of the ascending origin tier, which was a bit stronger than his power of regulation. Now, Huai Jian was covered with wounds, yet still dared to break through. How could it be anything but outrageously bold? But if he could survive even in such a state, that would be a great boost to Huai Jian's self-confidence, and could even be a rebirth of his mental state. As expected of Huai Jian, Ling Han shook his head and walked out of the arena. The first thing on his agenda was to run straight for the primordial battle beast egg. Now, it belonged to him. Bah, I wish to battle you again! Jing Zhongyu walked elegantly over, a precious sword in her hand. It looked like crystal, exuding a chilling aura. When she had her sword in hand, that was when she was truly the strongest she could be. I too wish to battle you, Shuegu declared in a grave voice. He had taken the form of a sturdy bald man, his skin blood red all over. His skin was extremely smooth, and it was guaranteed that there was not even a single pore to be found on it. Su Xing also stood at the sidelines, and did not say a word, but the fighting spirit blazing in his eyes said everything. Ling Han stowed the egg of the battle beast away, and then cast a guarded look at the three of them. You guys want to snatch my battle beast egg? Fuck! Jing Zhongyue and the others felt an urge to pummel Ling Han. How could they possibly do that? 3 days later, Sunset Mountains. Jing Zhongyue left these words behind, and departed. Now that Jing Zhongyue had snatched the lead, Su Xing and Shuegu could only rub their noses, and did not set a date for a battle. It was still hard to determine who would be winning between Jing Zhongyue and Ling Han. Furthermore, even if Ling Han won, he could still be severely injured, and winning a battle against him at that time would only be unjust. The Ling Han they wanted to defeat was the Ling Han in his strongest state. Ling Han returned to the side of Hu Niu and the other women, and immediately saw the incredibly excited expressions on Qi Shuang's and Yuan's face. Sun Feng and the others, though, had dark expressions. They naturally had no wish to see Ling Han shine so brightly. Niu wants to eat an egg! Hu Niu set her eyes on Ling Han, already drooling. Chapter 2346 You can use weapons too. Chapter 2346 You can use weapons too. Hearing Hu Niu say this, both Qi Shuang and Yuan got a scare, and hurriedly stopped her, fearing that Ling Han would really grill the egg in a moment of impulse and eat it. That was something that was equivalent to an ancestral weapon and had its own consciousness once it was hatched, and would definitely become ancestral king-level existence in the future. How precious was it? Ling Han couldn't help but smile. Even without Qi Shuang and Yuan stopping him, he would not let Hu Niu eat the battle beast egg, either. Be good, this egg is not delicious. After a few words of persuasion, Hu Niu finally dismissed the idea of eating the egg with much reluctance. They went back, and set out on their return journey after making some preparations. Meanwhile, Ling Han requested leave from Qi Shuang and Yuan, saying he wanted to travel the world. The two of them were very troubled by this. Ling Han had gotten first place in the elite leaderboard, and this was a great honor for the 100 Battles Academy. After they returned, there would definitely be a great celebration. The two of them were good leaders, so they would naturally feel proud as well, having gained a great honor, but if Ling Han did not return, the effects would be greatly subtracted. They tried to convince him repeatedly, but Ling Han had made his decision. In any case, his strength was clear to see. Even if Qi Shuang and Yuan used force, he could still calmly escape. Ling Han did not proceed to hatch the battle beast egg, but rather went into seclusion to meditate first, completely digesting the enlightenment he had attained in his battle with Huai Jian. 3 days later, he went to the Sunset Mountains as promised. Jing Zhongyue was already waiting there. One woman and her sword, a peerless talent unmatched. There were also many people standing around them. In fact, there were even some that had no space to stand, and could only remain afloat in midair. You're late! Seeing Ling Han stroll slowly over, Jing Zhongyue spoke in displeasure. I am too popular now, and had to greet too many people on my way here. If I had ignored them, it would not have been appropriate. I feared others would say that I was putting on airs now that I was famous, and that's why I am late," Ling Han explained smilingly. Jing Zhongyue's pretty face darkened. This guy really spoke nonsense easily. She had clearly seen that Ling Han had not greeted anyone on his way here. He was clearly just playing around with her. She humphed, waved her sword, and said, "This sword of mine is a 9th Lotus level precious tool. You can also use weapons too, so others would not say that I am being a bully." "Sure then." Ling Han nodded, and drew the divine demon's sword without reservations. With a slight wave of his hand, the sword immediately released a soft cry as if it was an invincible king that was issuing a warning. Suddenly, the crystalline precious sword in Jing Zhongyue's hand wriggled like a snake, as if it had encountered a terrifying monster, and was trembling in fear. Jing Zhongyue was stunned. This was her precious tool, and was mentally connected to her. Hence, she sensed that the sword in her hand was afraid, and the source of its fear was precisely the sword in Ling Han's hand. Fuck, it was already afraid when the battle had not even begun. Jing Zhongyue was both angered and stunned. She quickly waved the precious sword, planning to force it into battle. Pa! A crack actually appeared in the middle of the sword in her hands, which swiftly widened, and then the sword broke in half. This? Jing Zhongyue was rendered completely speechless. Her crystal sword had actually shattered itself just because of the fear it felt towards the sword in Ling Han's hand. It would rather break itself than dare to battle. Just what kind of subjugation was this? Ancestral weapon, she uttered with much difficulty. Only an ancestral weapon would be capable of subjugating a 9th Lotus precious tool. It was not qualified to even battle. Then what use was there to battle? Completely unarmed, she was absolutely no match for Ling Han. At first, she had planned to get a win with her superior precious weapon, but the result was even worse now. Before the battle had even begun, she had already lost. This guy was really too lucky, wasn't he? To actually possess an ancestral weapon. Ling Han waved the sword lightly, and asked smilingly, "Still want to battle?" Jing Zhongyue could say nothing. She turned around, and left with a flap of her wings. There was no way that she could match Ling Han unless she could obtain an ancestral weapon. With how valuable ancestral weapons were, to say nothing of obtaining, even if it was just lending, who would be willing to lend one to her? It would be better to wait until she became an ancestral king herself. Otherwise, she would be continuously suppressed by Ling Han's ancestral weapon, and there was no way that she would be able to make a comeback. The people gathered in the mountains were all speechless. Who would have imagined that the battle of titans that they had initially anticipated would actually end in this manner? Ling Han withdrew the divine demon sword, and left slowly. After returning to his quarters, Ling Han decided to first make the battle beast egg recognize him as master by dripping blood on it. Then, while it slowly hatched, he would continue to tour the foreign realm. When he had accumulated enough energy, he would then break through to the ascending origin tier. Within the Black Tower, his left hand held the battle beast egg, and he bit the index finger of his right hand. Instantly, blood dripped, and landed on the battle beast egg. While reciting in his mind, Ling Han dipped his finger in the blood, and began drawing on the egg. This was a seal that could help him connect to this beast egg, and form a slavery contract with the living creature inside. When the seal was completed, a frightening might suddenly surge towards Ling Han, as if an incredibly terrifying beast was opening its mouth, planning to rip into him. Ling Han discovered that he was in a dark space. There was no sky above him, or any ground below him. It was only a complete vacuum, but very soon, a majestic, giant creature appeared in front of him. It had the form of a fierce beast, but it was standing with 2 feet on the ground. These 2 hind legs were long and strong, and took up about more than half of its size, but its 2 front paws were pitifully small, being curled up at its chest. However, its mouth was colossal, showing 2 rows of teeth that seemed like they were forged from blades, emanating an eerie glow. What kind of monster was this? Ling Han could only say that his knowledge of the creatures of the foreign realm was really too limited, but there was one thing he was sure of: this wild beast was no ordinary beast. Pa 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 pa. The monster moved its feet, and charged rapidly towards Ling Han like a human. Opening its mouth, boom, it released a terrifying sound blast that swept out towards Ling Han. Instantly, enlightenment rose up in Ling Han's mind. He presently was only in spirit form, and the monster on the other side was the same as well. It came from that battle beast that had not hatched as of yet. As expected of an existence that was fated to become an ancestral king. It was extraordinarily fierce. It already had unprecedented, ferocious might before it had even been born. It was not willing to be enslaved by Ling Han. Thus, it began an intense battle with Ling Han in this spiritual world. If it could deal Ling Han a severe injury, it could then turn the situation around. Ling Han would be the slave, and it would be the master. This kind of slavery contract was two-sided in the first place, and the stronger one would be the one who made the rules. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh loudly. This battle beast was indeed destined to become an ancestral king, yet he was a man that would ultimately become a heavenly venerate. He greeted the incoming attack without fear, his whole body blazing with boundless flames. On the subject of slaughter, whom had he ever feared? Pun! The man and beast clashed, undergoing a solid collision, and then both were bounced backwards. This was a clash on the spiritual level, which had nothing to do with physique. The battle beast was born for battle, and would go berserk in combat. Though it had not been born yet, its violent might soared to the heavens. Immediately it raced back with rapid movement of its large paws. Its great mouth was open, biting out at Ling Han's neck. Ling Han's physique was shocking, and his spirit was not much inferior, either. He, too, rushed back with a battle cry, his strikes pouring down like rain. Pung, 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 the man and beast battled fiercely. The battle beast was incredibly mighty and violent, biting randomly with its mouth. Though its paws were small, their destructive power was extremely astonishing. Even the slightest contact could cause a heavy injury on Ling Han. They were in spirit form, and there would not be any apparent injuries, yet they would become weak. Whoever was exhausted to the extreme would then expose the core of their spirit, and the seal of slavery would thus be easily planted. Ling Han naturally was not inferior, either. With him using fists of fury continuously, the battle beast howled repeatedly, its form rapidly fading. Victory was in his grasp. Chapter 23:47 The Battle Beast is Born. Chapter 23:47 The Battle Beast is Born. The intense battle continued for who knew how long. Finally, Ling Han got the complete upper hand, the beast wailing in pain continuously at his attacks. Its figure was also becoming fainter and fainter, revealing the core within. Ling Han grabbed it in a single stroke, and instantly felt the thought of defiance and unwillingness to submit emanating from this battle beast. Because it was an existence destined to become an ancestral king. Ling Han laughed loudly, and sent out a message through divine sense as well. Don't feel that you are unfortunate. In the past, there were 9 source powers of heaven and earth that followed me, and which of them were not existences that would be able to become ancestral kings once they gained intelligence? As for me, my finish line is definitely not just ancestral king, nor is it heavenly venerable Tyr, but rather becoming a true overlord of the universe. If you follow me, it will only set you off on a path towards greater strength. Instantly, that battle beast appeared hesitant. It had not hatched, so its intelligence was no more than a 3-year-old child's. If it were not for the support of its primitive instincts, it could not possibly have attacked Ling Han either. With Ling Han's persuasive words now, its resolve was naturally swayed. Ling Han did not rush it either, and merely waited patiently. After a while, the battle beast opened its core on its own volition, and let down its guard completely against Ling Han. Ling Han stretched out a finger and pressed down, planting his own mark on the core of the battle beast's consciousness. Instantly, a certain special connection was formed between him and this battle beast. It was very hard to describe what kind of feeling this was. It was like his body had gained another limb that he could freely move, yet this limb had its own self-consciousness, and executed his commands completely once he issued them. No matter how unreasonable or dangerous this command was. How do I hatch you? Ling Han asked via divine sense. The regulations of the Great Tao nurture me the best, so, Master, you only need to use your power of regulation to cultivate me, and I will be born very quickly. The stronger the regulations you supply are, and the wider the variety, the sooner my birth will be," the battle beast said. Ling Han gave an "Oh. I have to give you a name." If the Empress and the others were present, they would definitely try to stop him with their best efforts. This guy really had no standards in terms of coming up with names. It would be something like Little White, Little Black, Little Cheen, or Little Gray. This battle beast was an existence that was destined to become an ancestral king. If some hideous name was given to it, it would definitely be teased to death in future. Too bad this battle beast did not know that, and still very happily exclaimed, "Please bestow a name on me, master." Though it had not hatched yet, it was already equipped with preliminary intelligence, but this time it had clearly gone blind. "I'll call you Little Terror then," Ling Han said. "With how terrifying you look, this is not a bad name. In the future you will be responsible for scaring people for me." It was a pity that this little beast did not understand at all, and was still cheering there happily, celebrating the fact that it now had a name. When it hatched, it would truly develop its own intelligence, and it would probably feel extremely depressed about its rash actions today at that time. "I'll go out first, and I will hatch you as soon as possible." Ling Han withdrew from the spiritual world, and then used the power of regulation to nurture this little guy with his arms around the beast egg. This time, it was not for the sake of battle. Ling Han extracted the power of regulation in a gentle manner, and it was all the regulations together at that, offering the best nurturing conditions for this battle beast. "Master, you have actually grasped so many regulations," the little guy exclaimed in shock, communicating this to Ling Han through divine sense. "Going by the look of things, I will be born in 3 years at most." Ling Han nodded, and activated the greatest eternity everlasting physique after he advanced to the 11th secret. His physique evolved from greatest eternity immortal physique into greatest eternity everlasting physique, which was much stronger than the former. He used time acceleration on himself, and the effects were not the least bit inferior to those of the time cultivation chambers outside. In fact, they were far superior because what he needed to accelerate was only himself. The burden was naturally countless times smaller, and the effects also increased madly. After cultivating this kind of physique, he actually would no longer need to use any time cultivation chamber. 3 years' time passed in the blink of an eye. A crack appeared on the eggshell with a crisp sound, and the crack widened quickly afterwards. The number of cracks also increased, endlessly spreading out. When the number of cracks had reached as many as over a dozen, a black paw suddenly stretched out of the crack, and ripped it apart. With that the eggshell broke apart like it had dried and aged. A small beast leaped out. It was completely black as ink, and only had a pair of ruby-like eyes. It looked exactly the same as the great monster that Ling Han had seen in the spiritual world. It was just countless times smaller. Adian was only a foot tall now. On the surface, it looked completely harmless, and instead seemed dumb and cute. The little beast saw Ling Han, and immediately approached, rubbing its head against Ling Han's calf. When it rubbed its head against him, Ling Han almost lost his footing and fell onto the ground. The little guy's brute power was extraordinarily shocking. Though it was also because Ling Han was taken off guard, how could he have been affected if there had not been enough power? Ling Han crouched down, and said to the little beast, "Little Terror, you are very impressive! Ayo! Ayo!" The little beast opened its mouth, and released what sounded like the howls of a wolf. Ling Han couldn't help but be dumbfounded. What part of this guy looked like a wolf that it actually let out such sounds? Could it be that its father had an inappropriate relationship with a female wolf, and thus such a little guy was born? If the little guy did not speak through divine sense, it would be no different than an infant that had just been born. Its calls were extremely childish, so cute that it would melt anyone's heart. Ling Han couldn't help but feel gloomy. He was such a mighty and dominant man. If he led such a little guy in public openly, would others look down on him? However, the brute force that the little guy displayed at birth was incredibly shocking. It was almost at the ascending origin tier already, so if it grew for a while longer, reaching the power of Celestial King Tyr would be just around the corner. But if it only had brute force, and did not have the support of corresponding regulations, it would still be useless. "Come, let me see your strength," Ling Han said, and tossed out a piece of pseudo-divine metal. It had been left behind after the divine demon's sword had advanced to the level of a celestial tool. Little Terror stretched out its front paw, and swiped at this piece of pseudo-divine metal. An ear-piercing sound rang out, causing Ling Han to feel great discomfort in his ears. However, his eyes lit up because a groove about half an inch deep had immediately appeared on the pseudo-divine metal where the little guy's claws had swiped. This was astonishing. The little guy hadn't used much force at all, and merely swiped out casually at the pseudo-divine metal. Though this was only a 3-star pseudo-divine metal, it could still prove that the little beast did not just have strength, but also indeed had astonishing destructive power. Ling Han took out another piece of pseudo-divine metal. This time, it reached the height of 6 stars. The little beast swiped its claws again, and a piercing sound rang out. A fine line was left behind on the 6-star pseudo-divine metal, but it was not very obvious. This angered the little beast. Its ruby-like eyes shone with a violent light as it charged forwards and randomly bit the pseudo-divine metal. When it loosened its jaws, this pseudo-divine metal was already damaged and tattered. So powerful! Ling Han tried again, and discovered that the limit of destructive power for the little beast was 7 stars pseudo-divine metal. It could damage it, but would need to expend a lot of power, and faced with 8 stars pseudo-divine metal, it could do nothing at all. This was already extremely terrifying. It should be known that the little guy had just been hatched. If it matured even further, just what kind of astonishing destructive power would it have? Ling Han studied the little guy's claws closely. Upon the first look, they were just black scales and hard armor, but if he studied it closer, he discovered that they were covered with seals. Green or blue. Just like in Japanese there's a word that means both those colors and another separate for green, but it's the former here. By the way, it's not uncommon to use such names as those for pets in China. Chapter 2348 Very Shocking. Chapter 2348 Very Shocking. Ling Han tested the little beast's defenses as well, and was stunned once more. The little guy's defense was also shockingly strong, capable of matching 7-star pseudo-divine metal, which was the same level as its destructive power. No wonder this little guy would be called a battle beast. It had a combination of frightening destructive power and defense, and was born specifically for the purpose of bloodshed and destruction. Ling Han couldn't help but think that there were war soldiers in the Dark Inverse Realm, and the Foreign Realm had battle beasts. Was this a race that the Foreign Realm had given rise to for the sake of its own protection? After all, they were already at the ascending origin tier from birth. This was too shocking, and did not match the normal pattern of heaven and earth, either. Powerful strength should be attained only through hard work, and not be something that one was born with, a harvest that was reaped without sowing. Hence, if battle beasts were born by the Foreign Realm for the sake of self-protection and to stand against the war soldiers, this would actually be a very logical deduction. Ling Han exited the Black Tower, and planned to ask Wally some questions. "Wow, what a cute puppy!" When they saw Little Terror, all the women's eyes lit up, looking like they wanted to pounce at any moment. Ling Han couldn't help but sweat madly. These women really should not see any adorable things, especially when they could not give birth to their own babies. Because of that, they had even less immunity to cute things. Furthermore, did this look like a puppy? What was wrong with your eyes? It looks quite delicious. Hunyo stroked her chin as she set her eyes on the little beast, already about to drool. Only she was different from the rest. Sensing Hunyo's animosity, Little Terror immediately turned to look at her. It bared its mouth, revealing 2 rows of snow-white teeth. In adulthood, it was extremely ferocious with those 2 rows of teeth looking like blades, and would cause a chill to rise up in anyone's heart, but at present, it could not look ferocious at all. Instead, others would only think that it was extremely cute and adorable. It was just like when a little puppy that had just been born was showing its rage who would be afraid. Ling Han laughed involuntarily and said, Nyo, calm down. This little guy is very fierce. Nyo was naturally unafraid, and snorted. Just a little guy, Nyo doesn't think it can even fill my stomach. Ayo! Little Terror released a roar, and howled at Nyo. But it was very childish, and did not seem at all threatening. The women couldn't help but laugh loudly, feeling that this little guy was really so fun to play around with. Come, let big sister hug you. Bewitching Maiden Rose stretched out her hand. Little Terror was furious. It was no pet, but rather a battle beast, born purely for the sake of battle. Cuteness had absolutely nothing to do with it. Ayo! It released another howl, but it was not out of rage this time, but rather because Ling Han was scratching its neck with a finger, which made it feel great comfort. The little guy looked plaintively at Ling Han. I am a mighty battle beast, not a pet. Ayo! It had not expected that the women would also rush forwards, and would rub it repeatedly, making the little guy so comfortable that its tail was stretched straight, and its gaze was even more adorable now. I am a battle beast. Battle beast. Battle beast, you bastards! The little guy's tummy was exposed. It was completely unguarded, allowing the women to ravage it as they liked. Of course, this was also because it knew that these were all its mistresses, and did not dare to resist. Otherwise, if anyone else had dared to bully it like this, the little guy would have long since exploded. It obediently took on the role of pet for the women to play with. In any case, it would not be hurt with its tough hide. Ling Han went off to seek out Wally. What relation do battle beasts have with war soldiers? Ling Han asked directly. Wally searched his memories and replied, Battle beasts should be creatures that this realm has created to oppose the war soldiers of our realm. They possess the unique traits of high defense and high destructive power, and that is for the purpose of destroying the war soldiers of our realm. However, the heaven and earth could not possibly interfere too much, and added with the extreme difficulty of reproduction of battle beasts, they have long since disappeared, and can be considered a failed attempt of the heaven and earth. Ling Han was curious, and asked, Then which of the two is stronger? If they were of the same level, it would naturally be the battle beast that was stronger. Wally immediately said. However, the number of battle beasts cannot compare to the number of war soldiers. A single war soldier may not be a match for the former, but they could attack in a group of 10, 20, or even 100 all at the same time. Ling Han nodded. Why had battle beasts gone extinct, and why could they now only be found in an ancient tomb? It was because this was an attempt that could not be emulated, and that was why they had been eliminated by the heaven and earth, the latter no longer willing to expend further energy on this aspect. However, though battle beasts had been eliminated, it did not mean that this kind of creature was not strong. It was just that their numbers were too low, and could not have extensive effects. You actually have a battle beast. Wally appeared slightly surprised. The expression of surprise was merely a slight widening of his mouth on his wooden face, but it was already a very impressive feat to actually manage to cause him to feel surprise. No need to admire me. I know I am very awesome, Ling Han said, smiling. Wally looked at Little Terror. Wang, his eyes lit up with a green light, and began to skin Little Terror up and down. Roar! Sensing this kind of green light, Little Terror immediately flipped over and stood up. It fixed its eyes on Wally, exploding with terrifying ferocious might. It did not know Wally, but the light that he emitted caused it to instinctively feel discomfort, or even fury. The moment this ferocious might was revealed, the women all got a scare, and only then did they know that this little guy actually had such a dominant side to it. For better or worse, it is still a battle beast, after all. Ling Han deliberately stepped back a little, and did not stop Little Terror from attacking. He was extremely curious about Wally's small world. The latter could absorb even one of the essence powers of a Genesis world, void particle energy. What kind of freak was this? Wally did not react, and continued scanning Little Terror. Little Terror was completely enraged now. Since Ling Han did not stop it, its bloodthirst as a battle beast immediately exploded. Teng, 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 it moved its two hind legs. It was very strong and powerful. Even though its feet were tiny, it had astonishing explosive power. Shio, it instantly rushed in front of Wally, and then stretched out its claws which swiped outwards. Wally stepped back, but his feet did not move. Instead, his whole person simply slid back like that, which was extremely bizarre. However, this kind of evasive method was extremely efficient. No matter how little terror attacked him, he would always manage to dodge in time. Ling Han's eyes lit up. What Wally was using should be regulations of space, but they were not regulations of space, which was extremely strange. This was the power of heaven and earth that was superior to regulations. Regulations were manifested from the power of heaven and earth, and actually belonged to the power of heaven and earth as well, but when cultivators battled, they would have to first draw on regulations, and convert them into attack power or speed. There was a process of conversion. No matter how fast this process was, it would still need time. Hence, Wally would have the chance to dodge. Of course, aside from Wally, others would also need to use regulations for evasion. This similarly had a process of conversion. In that case, there was no visible advantage. As Ling Han studied, he actually could also use a sliver of the power of heaven and earth, and that was thanks to his body that had been tempered by void particle energy. He could directly draw on his own power, and would not need to stimulate regulations first to convert them into either attack power or speed. Theoretically, though my power is only at the pinnacle of the ascending origin tier, my battle prowess should not be limited to that if I could fully make use of my advantage, he mused. As expected, having Little Terror battle Wally was a wise decision. Wally soon stopped the scanning green light. While calmly dodging Little Terror's attacks, he said to Ling Han, "This battle beast has very strong genes, and is worth nurturing. Though a battle beast would definitely become a celestial king, there were still 9 heavens in celestial king tier." Chapter 2349 Huai Jian's Invitation. Chapter 2349 Huai Jian's Invitation. In the area of analysis, Ling Han was only impressed with Wally. Since the latter said that Little Terror was worth nurturing, then it was definitely worth nurturing. Ling Han couldn't help but rub his chin. Could he find a female for this kind of powerful battle beast so that it could have a bunch of kids, and let him build a powerful troop of battle beasts? However, the little guy had just hatched. It was a little inappropriate to have such ideas about it now. Never mind. He'd wait and see when it was older. Little Terror seemed to have sensed Ling Han's gaze, and involuntarily shuddered. It looked towards Ling Han, its gaze plaintive. Ling Han laughed loudly. With a mere thought, the little guy immediately stopped obediently, and made no further move to attack. He picked the little guy up, and then took out a great number of alchemical pills and celestial medicines. "Come, little guy, eat some more, so you can grow up quickly." His eyes shone, already planning to use Little Terror like a stud. Hold on, was the little guy male or female? He couldn't help but turn his eyes to the spot between the legs of the little guy, causing the little guy to break out in an involuntary shudder as it clamped its legs together tightly. "Even if you are my master, you cannot peep on my private areas." This little guy can have developed wariness, right? It would be reluctant even if I had a mate in the future. Little guy, that is a fun activity. What kind of mood are you having? True, it is still too young. It will change in future. Bah! Right at this moment, a voice rang out from outside. Ling Han heard it, and couldn't help but appear slightly surprised. A dashing, incredibly handsome young man of the angel race stood outside his door. He had a captivating demeanor as well, and others would feel the urge to worship him. Huai Jian. Ling Han nodded and asked. There weren't any residual effects, right? The other had broken through to the 9th lotus in a state of severe injury. The slightest accident could cause a serious Dao injury, which would be a great problem. Huai Jian cracked a smile. I do indeed have some injuries, but I see them as a kind of grinding stone. After I erase this Dao injury, my battle prowess will be further boosted. Ling Han's eyes involuntarily narrowed, and he said, You actually can completely expel your internal injuries, right? Huai Jian was taken aback slightly, and only then replied, You have guessed correctly. That is indeed the case. This guy was really mad that he would actually dare to deliberately leave an internal injury inside his body when he was breaking through just to temper himself. Ling Han pondered. Even he would not dare to mess around like that. That was completely playing with fire. But it could not be denied that if Huai Jian had really destroyed that Dao injury with his own powerful determination and willpower, his battle prowess would indeed have been raised to a frightening height. True, he wanted to surpass Ling Han, so he would definitely have to use a method that was not normal. That was because they had already reached the normal limits, or even far surpassed them long ago. To further improve from the limits, they could only resort to extreme methods. There was actually not much difference between a prodigy and a maniac. Ling Han smiled and said, "Have you sought me out for another fight?" His fighting spirit was very strong. Sparring with an elite like Huai Jian was greatly beneficial for him. Huai Jian shook his head. "I am already a 9th lotus, but you are only in the 8th lotus. If I exchanged blows with you, that would be an unjust victory. When you advance to the 9th lotus, we will battle again." "All right." Ling Han did not force the matter. Monarch stars were naturally proud, what more when it was Huai Jian. "I have sought you out today just to ask if you have the interest to take Lord Desolate Eternity as master with me," Huai Jian said solemnly. "Lord Desolate Eternity?" Ling Han appeared slightly surprised. Who was this now? Huai Jian was also surprised and asked, "Could it be that you don't know who Lord Desolate Eternity is?" Ling Han scratched his head. "I really don't." Huai Jian shook his head. "Lord Desolate Eternity is a heavenly venerate." Oh, so this was a heavenly venerate of the foreign realm. Ling Han chuckled and said, "How could a heavenly venerate possibly take me as a disciple?" Huai Jian shook his head and said, "You are being too modest here. Your aptitude has far surpassed that of a great majority of descendants of heavenly venerates. If you still couldn't gain the serious notice of a heavenly venerate, I would not be able to bring myself to introduce you either." A heavenly venerate did not have many descendants, but because his bloodline was too powerful, it was extremely easy for monarch stars to emerge from his bloodline, ones that could attain up to the height of 18th Lotus Ancestral King, but they could not even dream of being capable of going beyond the threshold of the Ancestral Kings. At the very least, there had never been a legend of two heavenly venerates emerging from the same line in the foreign realm. However, there was still difference in strength among monarch stars, just like in the promised battle between the foreign realm and celestial realm, when Ji Wuming was practically capable of matching Qi Shui. Furthermore, it was in a situation when the former was inferior by a minor level at that. Qi Shui was a monarch star, and was also a descendant of heavenly venerate Qi Yan, but even then, so what? In a battle of equals, Ji Wuming would definitely win. Ling Han's brain immediately became active. Should he agree? Actually, he very much wanted to come in contact with a heavenly venerate. Since he, too, wanted to step into this threshold, if he came in contact with it beforehand, it would be easier for him to have a clear glimpse of the path that lay ahead of him. But the problem here was this: with the insight of a heavenly venerate, would his heaven-deceiving technique be capable of deceiving him? Hold on, didn't he have Wally? Ling Han paused silently and said, "Allow me to consider. Could I give you a reply tomorrow?" Huai Jian was unbelievably stunned. He still had to consider this. Fuck, this was sending you to become the disciple of a heavenly venerate, not demanding that you go to the battlefield. How many monarch stars were there that wanted this opportunity but were not granted it, and you actually said that you wanted to consider? If it had to be anyone considering, it should be heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity. If it were not for the fact that Huai Jian admired Ling Han very much, and had a strong wish to defeat this opponent in the future, and thus did not wish that Ling Han was too weak, he would definitely have turned around and left by now. All right then, he agreed. When Huai Jian had left, Ling Han immediately called Wally over and questioned him. "You want to fool an existence that has a vitality index over 15,000? Wally's eyes lit up and dimmed, seeming to be going through the process of calculation and deduction. After a while he said, "No way, you cannot do it. Ling Han couldn't help but sigh. It looked like his hope of getting in close contact with a heavenly venerate was going to be fruitless. However, if I help you do some modifications, you should be able to do so. Who would have expected Wally would come around with a major turn of events? Ling Han couldn't help but break in a cold sweat. Could it be that Wally had been influenced by him, and had now learned to joke around as well? Teach me, he said. Wally did not immediately teach him, but rather asked him to teach him the heaven-deceiving technique, which he would then modify further. Ling Han exerted time acceleration effects on him. Half a day later, Wally's eyes snapped open. It's done! He nodded, and his eyes shone. Teaching the modified heaven-deceiving technique through formulae and models, he said, "This is also slightly helpful for me, allowing me to better conceal myself, so I will not collect payment from you." Right, this guy hadn't changed in the slightest. Ling Han looked at these formulae and models, and felt a headache coming on, but Wally would only display the cultivation technique, in this format. In his eyes, the world was like this. It was a massive model, and this giant model could be further divided into countless formulae. Everything had a logic that could be traced. Ling Han ignored that first. Not only did he memorize these formulae and models, the women were no exception either. Primarily, it was the Empress, Huai, and Bewitching Maiden Ro. For the other women, their cultivation levels were too low, so there was not much meaning for them to cultivate the heaven-deceiving technique, as they would not be able to fool many people. They had best just obediently stay inside the Black Tower. A day passed, and when Huai Jian came again, Ling Han nodded decisively. "Sure, let's go together." Huai Jian couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. He was not begging Ling Han here. Did you feel so very unfortunate to become a disciple of a heavenly venerate? Chapter 2350 Divine Desolate Mountain. Chapter 2350 Divine Desolate Mountain. Because Ling Han said he would go with Huai Jian to heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity, Yuan and Qi Shuang naturally had no further right to refuse him, and could only send Ling Han on his way with eyes filled with envy. But what made them even depressed was the fact that even the Empress, Huai, and Bewitching Maiden Ro ran off with him. Two of them were monarch stars, and would be able to gain further honor for 100 Battles Academy in future. Yet did they dare to contend with a heavenly venerate over them? Ling Han and his group set out. Huai Jian naturally knew the way, and led their group. On their journey, they used transfer formations to cover the distance. Wally still took the form of an ornament hanging from the corner of Ling Han's robes. He had also used the heaven-deceiving technique, his skill of concealing himself having improved greatly. About 7 years passed, and they finally arrived at their destination. This was an incredibly majestic great mountain, so tall that one could only look up at it. There were clouds of various colors entwined around the mountain, exuding a boundless air of majesty and austerity, and making others only want to fall to their knees in worship. It was like there was a heavenly venerate seated there. This was Divine Desolate Mountain, and also the place of enlightenment of that heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity. Heavenly venerates varied in their personalities. Some heavenly venerates kept an incredibly low profile. It was not even impossible that no one knew that they existed. Some heavenly venerates kept a very high profile, and their reputation spread far and wide, intimidating the rest of the world. Not only did this heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity keep a high profile, he was also very fond of accepting disciples. He had more than 30 disciples under his name, but it was like there was a curse. The heavenly venerate could not give rise to another heavenly venerate through his teachings. Every heavenly venerate in history had walked the path of the strongest with their own power, and for those disciples of heavenly venerates, their highest accomplishment would only be limited to 18th Lotus Ancestral King, though it was possible that they would be incredibly strong and very close to the height of pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. Of course, prodigies would never admit defeat. Take Huai Jian, for example. His goal was definitely to become a heavenly venerate, yet why would he then take the heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity as a master? Because he was confident that he could break the curse. Actually, every single monarch star had that kind of confidence, but there had ultimately been none that could break this curse. they only increased the weight of this curse further and further. Ling Han naturally did not believe it, either. Otherwise, why would he have come? Only one thing was clear, and that was that attaining heavenly venerable tier was really, really difficult. They ascended the mountain. Ling Han and his group had long since learned the newly modified heaven-deceiving technique. According to Wally, not even a heavenly venerate could possibly see through it. Meanwhile, Little Terror had not grown at all in these years, still looking dumbly cute. However, its battle prowess had increased considerably. Now, it was mere child's play for it to chew through 7 stars pseudo-divine metal, and faced with 8 stars pseudo-divine metal, it could still manage to create a mark. The moment they entered the mountainous area, they had lost all sense of direction. They felt like they were surrounded by fog everywhere, and could not even see the fingers on their own hands. Not only was it sight, even their hearing and divine sense had been sealed altogether. Huai Jian took out a small pendant, but the moment he took it out, it expelled the fog, and they could now see in a limited range of at least 30 meters. "This is the token bestowed by Lord Desolate Eternity," he explained to Ling Han and the others. They were just about to set out when they all stopped, and Little Terror, who was in Bewitching Maiden Rose arms, bared its teeth, exposing its ferocious nature. "I am Huai Jian, and have come to pay a visit by the command of Lord Desolate Eternity." Huai Jian cupped his fists in greeting. "So you are Huai Jian?" A voice rang out from ahead of them, but they could not see the speaker. The other was more than 30 meters away from them. "Though Master has plans to take you as a disciple, why have you brought a group of people that have no business here?" that person continued, carrying an overbearing tone. Huai Jian replied, "This man's name is Ba, and he is the first place holder of the elite leaderboard of the Thousand Academy tournament this time. He is astonishingly talented in cultivation. I know Lord Desolate Eternity is most fond of nurturing the especially talented members of the younger generation, and have thus deliberately brought him here for Lord Desolate Eternity to take a look." First place of the elite leaderboard? The person on the opposing side released a scoff. "A tournament that we, the heirs of a heavenly venerate, have not taken part in is nothing but child's play, and you actually have the face to make such a declaration?" He paused, and continued, "Huai Jian, don't think that you can forget yourself just because Master has taken notice of you. It should be known that you will only be one of the 37 disciples that Master has taken. Moreover, you are not a disciple yet." Huai Jian couldn't help but look furious, and said, "Whether Lord Desolate Eternity wishes to take Ba as a disciple or not is naturally to be decided by Lord Desolate Eternity. Is there any need for you to make the decision here? How dare you?" The person on the other side finally showed himself. This was a youth of the demon race. He had 4 horns on his head, which just happened to point in the 4 directions of north, south, east, and west. They were more than a foot long, which was extremely interesting. Hunyo couldn't help but set her eyes on his horns, clicking her tongue in amazement as she continued staring. That member of the demon race was displeased by her gaze, and couldn't help but shout, "What are you looking at?" "Looking at how ugly you are!" Hunyo exclaimed. "Fuck!" Killing intent immediately appeared on that demon's face. With a wave of his right hand, a battle spear 6 meters long appeared in his grasp. Wielding the battle spear, he stabbed it right at Hunyo without a second word. This spear's strike was fast, accurate, and ruthless, bearing terrifying killing intent and might, which was enough to kill any ordinary 9th Lotus elite. Because he was a 9th Lotus First Leaf Monarch Star, he had the battle prowess of the peak stage of a 9th Lotus Second Leaf. Hunyo had not even moved when Little Terror released a roar, and darted out of Bewitching Maiden Rose arms, biting out at that battle spear. This was its mistress, and now that someone had made a move to attack her, it, as a loyal dog, naturally had to charge out in the lead. Now that it was on the topic, this mistress kept drooling as she stared at it. It actually did not very much want to leap out, but who asked it to be so loyal? With a clamp, Little Terror bit the battle spear, and was not letting go. Dumbfounded, the demon on the other side couldn't help but watch with shock. He was a Monarch Star, a 9th Lotus First Leaf Monarch Star, and those that could suppress him, aside from ancestral kings, would only have to be someone with battle prowess on the level of the 9th lotus third leaf. But no matter how he looked at it, this newly born battle cub could not possibly be that kind of existence. However, his battle spear had fallen into the mouth of this little beast that looked so incredibly cute, and it was like it had grown roots. It could not be moved in the slightest, and no matter how hard or strongly he pulled, it was still useless. This little beast's power was too terrifying, wasn't it? Little Terror showed its might. With a crack, it forcefully ripped through the battle spear. That demon took several steps back, his face filled with shock. It should be known that this battle spear was 7 stars pseudo-divine metal, practically close to the toughness he had when he was on full power defense, but Little Terror had still forcefully bitten through it. Just how unbelievable was that? Even if Little Terror had the upper hand, it had no plans to spare the opponent. It pounced one more, and launched a powerful offensive at that demon. The demon hurriedly parried, but because of his wariness of the sharpness of Little Terror's fangs, he actually did not dare to parry head-on, and could only continuously retreat as he battled. Huai Jian couldn't help but feel shocked. That demon was a 9th lotus first leaf, just like him. Though he was a supreme monarch star, and the demon might not be, the latter had cultivated a much longer time on the level of 9th lotus than Huai Jian had. Thus, the battle prowess of the two of them was actually more or less the same. In other words, if it had been him, it would probably have been the same result. So this was that battle beast egg? Even if Huai Jian had always believed firmly in his own strength, he couldn't help but show a sliver of envy. Originally it had been prepared for him, yet now it had become Ling Han's battle pet. This thought merely flashed past in his mind before disappearing. He was filled with confidence in himself once more. As long as he erased the Tao injury in his body, a great boost would take place in his battle prowess, and he would definitely be capable of suppressing Ling Han. Chapter 2351 Jealousy. Chapter 2351 Jealousy. I refuse to believe this! That demon roared in fury. How could I, Si Huang Yun, lose to a baby beast? From first look, he could tell that Little Terror had not been born very long ago. Its flame of life had only been burning for a limited period of time. If he lost to Little Terror, he would really become a massive joke. In the future, he would never be able to raise his head high and face others. He attacked madly, but Little Terror was a battle beast. The heaven and earth had given rise to it purely for the sake of battle. There was no need for it to learn anything else at all in future. It only had to act on its instincts. The little guy had a tough hide, practically reaching the height of 8 stars pseudo-divine metal, which could more or less ignore Si Huang Yun's attacks, yet its attacks were incredibly harsh. As its tiny claws flourished, Si Huang Yun's defense melted like snow that had encountered fire. This naturally made Si Huang Yun extremely uncomfortable, and he continuously evaded, appearing very battered and exhausted. Only now did the Empress and the others truly know how powerful Little Terror could be. They were all stunned, and even Hu Niu was pouting. Though she was an 11th secret monarch star, with her battle prowess comparable to small accomplishment of the ascending origin tier, she was not just a bit away from being capable of matching an opponent at great accomplishment of the ascending origin tier. There were 3 levels in the ascending origin tier, but there was a massive gap between each level. Even a monarch tier could only be invincible in a battle of equal cultivation levels. Only a monarch star could overcome the gap in cultivation level and crush a superior opponent. But Hu Niu had not advanced to the ascending origin tier yet, so she could only vanquish all those at small accomplishment level of the ascending origin tier. Niu will work hard on cultivation, and advance into the ascending origin tier as soon as possible, then eat meat. This glutton's fiery fighting spirit was immediately ignited. For the sake of eating, she could suffer. Si Huang Yun roared in fury. He really could not suppress Little Terror. The little guy was a born war machine, a tool for bloodshed. Acting cute was definitely not its strength. Stop! He shouted. If they continued fighting, he would lose, and it would be a terrible defeat. Ling Han merely chuckled, and did not say a word, having absolutely zero intention to call a halt to events. Huai Jian, too, crossed his arms over his chest, acting like he had not heard anything. Monarch stars like them all had great pride. Si Huangyun actually dared to treat them so lightly, which naturally made them very displeased. How could they not let him have a little suffering? When the robes covering Si Huangyun's arms and thighs had all become torn and tattered, only then did Huai Jian say to Ling Han, "Brother Ba, that's about enough, right?" Ling Han was still not satisfied. Sending out a thought, Little Terror immediately stopped attacking, and leaped backwards to return. It then curled up again in bewitching Maiden Rose arms, as obedient as if it was a dog. Si Huangyun panted harshly. Now, he was really battered and exhausted. His initially lavish robes were now torn and tattered. He looked no different than a beggar. He glared harshly at Little Terror, which was immediately sensed by the creature, and the latter glared back angrily at him. Its mouth was again opened, revealing 2 rows of tiny fangs. Si Huangyun turned his head, and looked towards Ling Han. This was the real culprit. "If you want to become Master's disciple, are you just going to depend on this beast pet?" he demanded proudly. He could lose a battle, but definitely could not lose face. Ling Han couldn't help but grin. "What is it? Are you jealous that I have something you don't?" Si Huangyun humphed. He was a man that was destined to become an 18th Lotus ancestral king. Would he care about a mere beast pet? But it could not be denied that this beast pet was really very frightening. He was already a monarch star himself, yet was still no match for this beast pet. Was this little guy going to defy the heavens? "Fight me, and if you can parry 100 moves from me, I will inform Exalted Master of your arrival," he stated his condition. Huai Jian flew into a rage. He was also a very proud man, and had always kept his word. He said that he would make introductions for Ling Han, yet the other man was obstructing them in all form and manner, and established conditions. This was an insult to him. Was he trying to take them a notch down? His eyes narrowed. On this matter, he was in the same boat as Ling Han. "Si Huangyun, do you even have face? Ba is only an 8th Lotus 11th leaf, yet you are a 9th Lotus 1st leaf. How is he supposed to fight you?" he shouted. Yet Si Huangyun showed absolutely no hint of embarrassment, and stated calmly, "I do not demand that he defeat me. It is merely parrying 100 strikes. If he can't do even that, what right does he have to become Master's disciple? I will fight with you," Huai Jian declared. "You?" Si Huangyun chuckled. "If you can parry 100 strikes from me, you naturally can also go to meet Master, but you cannot substitute for him." He pointed at Ling Han. Ling Han said smilingly, "I hate it the most when others point their finger at me." "So what about it?" Si Huangyun demanded arrogantly. "Then I'll just close the doors, and let the dog out." With a thought from Ling Han, Ling Terror immediately charged out again, and pounced at Si Huangyun. Pun pun pun. The moment the little guy was in battle, it was crazy. It would be ripping, biting, and chewing, completely aiming to dismember Si Huangyun. "You are shameless!" Si Huangyun hurriedly dodged left and right. He was deliberately bullying Ling Han, wanting to use his superior advantage of a major tier to deal with the latter, but he had not expected that Ling Han would not be falling for it at all. Instead, the latter had Little Terror step out in his place, which instantly made him feel very wounded. Pieces of fabric flew and scattered, and there was less and less cloth covering Si Huangyun. What should or should not be revealed was all exposed. Furthermore, Little Terror had also bitten his legs and behind a few times. Its teeth marks were distinct, and blood was dripping as Si Huangyun continuously let out yowls of pain. Actually, he was not someone with a weak will. Even if his bones broke and tendons tore, he would not even frown, but now his behind was being bitten by a wild beast. This feeling was completely different. Moreover, Little Terror's teeth were really too sharp, causing bone-deep pain with every bite. "Ha ha ha, junior brother Si Huangyun, why do you look so battered?" Amidst a laugh, another person walked out. However, this time it was a youth of the angel race. Similarly, a ninth lotus was clear on his forehead. He was also a first leaf. Si Huang Yun was tired from dodging, and could not even muster up the strength to refute him. However, his face was flush red in extreme embarrassment and fury. This angel smiled at Huai Jian, and said, "Junior brother Huai Jian, I am Feng Hailuan, Exalted Master's 32nd disciple. Greetings, senior brother Feng." Huai Jian also cupped his fists to pay respects. Feng Hailuan looked at Little Terror with envy. "So this is the gift that Exalted Master has bestowed on junior brother? Even I am envious." He had heard of primordial battle beasts before. Though he was also very tempted, and wanted to possess one, would he dare speak of this to the heavenly venerate? Realization dawned on Huai Jian. No wonder Si Huang Yun had verbally caused trouble for them from the very beginning. As it turned out, the reason lay here. Jealousy. He smirked coldly in his heart. A great monarch star would actually spend his energy on fits of jealousy. How was he then to ascend to the pinnacle of cultivation? No wonder the heavenly venerate could not cultivate another heavenly venerate from his disciples. Part of the reason was that these disciples had focused their efforts on contending for his favor. If they had a determination to become a heavenly venerate, what need would there be to be concerned about external factors like a battle beast? After becoming a heavenly venerate, what could they not obtain? Huai Jian shook his head with a smile, and replied, "This battle beast is not mine, but rather belongs to Brother Ba." "En?" Feng Hailuan was surprised before showing a hint of displeasure. "What our exalted master has bestowed on junior brother has actually passed on to another. Fuck, you are really too generous. Not even I have something so precious. Even if you had wanted to pass it to someone else, you should have passed it to another disciple of heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity. What do you mean by giving it to an outsider?" "That's not it," Huai Jian said with a smile. "This is what Brother Ba has won with his own abilities." He related the matter of the battle for the first place of the elite leaderboard, and admitted frankly that he had indeed lost to Ling Han, though the gap between them was really pitifully small. Feng Hailuan's eyes lit up. "Ba, right? Let us have a battle, and if you lose, you will have to give this battle beast over to me." Chapter 2352 Beaten Until Bursting. Chapter 2352 Beaten Until Bursting. This was really too shameless. What was Feng Hailuan's cultivation level? He was a 9th lotus first leaf, and a monarch star at that. As for Ling Han? An 8th lotus 11th leaf. Even if they were both monarch stars, wasn't there still a gap of a major tier between the two of them? Even if the 11th leaf could barely be considered a 9th lotus, Feng Hailuan would still have the advantage of a minor level. What monarch star could defeat another monarch star with the gap of a minor level between them, especially when they were both on the level of the 9th lotus? Wasn't this clearly snatching the battle beast by force? Huai Jian also faltered. "You are also a monarch star yourself, and still act so brazenly. So shameless. Senior brother Feng, this is Ba. I have deliberately brought him here to introduce him to Lord Desolate Eternity." Huai Jian's expression darkened. Feng Hailuan smiled faintly in response. If the battle beast was in Huai Jian's possession, he would definitely not dare to snatch it by force. This was the heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity's arrangements. Who would dare go against the will of a heavenly venerate? But Ling Han was a different story altogether. Even if he really became the disciple of the heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity, that was still a future matter. Moreover, the heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity's attitude towards his disciples had always been, leaving them alone. If you were strong enough, you could win what belonged to you. Ling Han had also snatched this battle beast from Huai Jian's possession, so it was natural that Feng Hailuan could snatch it over for himself as well. In the future, if Ling Han had the ability, he could snatch it back as well. Of course, he would definitely suppress Ling Han continuously, not allowing him the opportunity to surpass himself. "Junior brother Huai Jian, you still do not know the rules of our line of Desolate Eternity. I don't blame you, but you should not interfere in this matter," Feng Hailuan said, his tone slightly severe. He was already putting on airs as a senior brother. Right at this moment, a commotion was actually heard from behind him, and very soon, the fog visibly parted, giving way to 3 people. They were Jing Zhongyue, Su Xing, and Shuige. They, too, held a small pendant, which was emanating light, dispelling the fog. Clearly, they had also gained the notice of the heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity, who had given them the key to ascend the divine Desolate Mountain. Why didn't Ling Han have one too? When they spotted Ling Han and Huai Jian, Jing Zhongyue and the others were also extremely surprised. You guys are... Feng Haowan's eyes swept over them. These 3 people were actually holding the token of the heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity, which meant that he had another 3 junior brothers and junior sister, which also meant that the competition was becoming more intense. I am Shuige. I am Su Xing. I am Jing Zhongyue. Jing Zhongyue and the others introduced themselves, but their expressions were all proud, holding no hint of respect. This was the pride that belonged to a supreme monarch star. Feng Haowan's brow wrinkled in a frown, but he very soon set this matter aside, and turned his attention back to Ling Han. If you dare not fight me, scram off the mountain! Without the token of the heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity in Ling Han's possession, Feng Haowan absolutely had no need to show Ling Han any cordiality. Yet Huai Jian frowned, thinking that it was possible that he had accidentally caused a problem despite his good intentions. Since Jing Zhongyue and the others had all gotten the favor of the heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity, then it was impossible that Ling Han, who was even stronger, had not. That only meant one thing, and that was the heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity already knew that Huai Jian had brought Ling Han here, so he did not bother to manifest again just to bestow his token. But now that things had progressed to this point, it was too late for him to have any regrets. Jing Zhongyue and the others had not expected that they would encounter the scene of Ling Han facing off against the disciples of the heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity at their arrival, and couldn't help but feel greatly intrigued. But no matter how high their opinion of Ling Han was, they did not think that he could possibly be a match for Feng Haowan. It could not be helped. The gap in cultivation level was clearly obvious. Ling Han chuckled, yet the expression on his face became menacing. Since you are asking for a beating, I will just have to oblige you. Ha 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 ha, what shameless boasting! Feng Haowan grinned in his fury. A mere 8th Lotus 11th Leaf actually dared to declare he was going to beat him up. Where did he get his courage from? Ling Han stretched out his right hand, and crooked a finger. If you want a beating, bring it on! Feng Haowan released a roar. Like a primordial monster emerging, it shook millions and millions of kilometers. He moved aggressively, and sent out a punch. Instantly, millions and millions of shooting stars crashed down from the skies, intending to kill Ling Han forcefully. In any case, Ling Han was not of their line, so what if he killed him? Did the disciple of a heavenly venerate need any reason to commit murder? Ling Han's eyes turned cold. Bending his legs slightly, he suddenly bounced, instantly exploding with a frightening speed. Pun pun pun. One after another, the shooting stars crashed down, yet they were all shattered with a single punch from him. Huai Jian, Shuige, and the others all looked stunned. They knew that Ling Han was very strong, but no matter how strong he was, there had to be a limit. After all, he was only an 8th Lotus 11th Leaf. At maximum, his battle prowess would only be at the peak stage of the 9th Lotus 1st Leaf, but Feng Haowan's battle prowess had definitely reached 9th Lotus 2nd Leaf. This was a massive gulf that could not be breached. Yet Ling Han did not care what they were thinking. With him brandishing his fist continuously, the shooting stars that fell were all shattered with a single punch. He had already charged towards Feng Haowan, a fist aimed straight for the latter's face. Feng Haowan was also stunned and confused. In fact, he even felt an inconceivable chill. This kind of might was inconceivable in the eyes of a monarch star like him. However, he naturally couldn't possibly just receive this punch from Ling Han. He hurriedly shouted, and made his right hand's fingers bend like claws, which stabbed towards Ling Han. Boom! The two fighters' hands clashed together, instantly causing a frightening storm of energy that assaulted the skies, which turned into what seemed like furious dragons. Jing Zhongyue and the others couldn't help but widen their eyes. That was because Ling Han was really not at a disadvantage in this exchange. In fact, he was slightly enjoying the upper hand. There is no power of regulation. This is purely brute force. But how could that be? Without regulations, no matter how strong you were, it would still be useless, as it could not cause much damage. Huai Jian pondered quietly for a long while, and finally said, "No, he has still used regulations, yet it is a kind of regulation that we cannot comprehend." Were there any regulations like that? Jing Zhongyue exchanged looks with the others. But if that was not the case, they really could not accept the fact that pure brute force could actually contend against the 9th Lotus First Leaf Monarch Star. It should be known that even if the power of regulation was removed from an ancestral king, his battle prowess would only be at the level of the 6th Lotus. Amidst their utter shock, Ling Han had already sent out a barrage of fists of fury, pummeling Feng Hailuan endlessly. What had he done? First, it was Si Huangyun, and now it was Feng Hailuan. Did they all think that he was an easy target to bully? If so, he would have to burst out. Huai Jian and the others had all gone mad. Feng Hailuan had actually fallen into a disadvantage, and it was an absolute disadvantage at that, with Ling Han suppressing him completely in battle. This kind of battle prowess had to be about the peak stage of the 9th Lotus Second Leaf, right? Huai Jian swallowed with much difficulty. He was a 9th Lotus First Leaf Monarch Star, and was a Supreme Monarch Star at that. Even if he had just advanced into this level, he only possessed the battle prowess of the early stage 9th Lotus Second Leaf. But this was also his limit. To explode with even stronger battle prowess, he could only use powerful moves. As for Ling Han, even if he was constantly using powerful moves, he should not be so powerful still. And to think that he actually said that he did not want to suppress Ling Han with his superior cultivation level. But from the look of things now, if the two of them really were to fight, would he be able to withstand 100 moves from Ling Han? Pun! 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 Ling Han exploded. He drew close to Feng Hailuan, and every punch he delivered was like the intense collision of endless great stars, blasting Feng Hailuan to the point of throwing up blood non-stop. Crack! His fist landed on Feng Hailuan's face, and forcefully crushed half of his face. Even his bones had been crushed into dust. The man's countenance completely turned into a mess of blood and flesh. What bit of the dashing and handsome good looks that a member of the angel race had was left on him. Ling Han continued the attack with a knee. Ping! A muffled sound was heard from within Feng Hailuan's body. That was the sound of various internal organs inside his body being crushed. Chapter 2353 Human. Chapter 2353 Human. Feng Hailuan screamed in pain as his vitality declined greatly. He had long since cultivated the mystery realms of the body, but now they were forcefully destroyed by Ling Han, which naturally caused him serious injuries. "What are you howling for? Weren't you speaking very tough?" Ling Han tossed him onto the ground, and a crack was heard with a forceful stomp. Feng Hailuan instantly released a harsh cry. His left leg had been forcefully broken, the broken bone exposed, red and white all over. "How does it feel to be bullied?" Ling Han followed with another stomp. Feng Hailuan's right leg was also broken, the part of his knee directly sunken. Only a bit of torn flesh was left connected to his calf. "Fun, right?" Ling Han smirked coldly, raising his foot high. This time, he was aiming straight for the place between Feng Hailuan's legs. Feng Hailuan was almost crazy with panic. Being injured by an elite of Ling Han's level would leave behind extremely serious aftereffects. For example, he would need at least a few thousand years to heal his broken bones, if a heavenly venerate or ancestral king did not interfere. And if his crotch was stomped on, it was a small matter that he would not be able to use his D*CK for a few thousand years. More importantly, the psychological humiliation would mean that he would be living in a nightmare for the rest of his life. On the other side, Little Terror had also pounced on Si Huangyun, harshly biting into his bottom. Si Huangyun was in so much pain that he was sprawled out on the ground. He was continuously kicking out with his legs, as if it was better for him to die than be alive at this moment. This man and beast, or master and servant, were really both too powerful. He, as expected of the champion of the elite leaderboard of the 1000 Academy tournament, impressive. Applause rang out, and a young girl from the demon race appeared. Her features were actually quite delicate, but accompanied with the looks of the demon race, she still did not match the aesthetic values of Ling Han and the others. However, Su Xing's eyes immediately lit up. He was a genuine member of the demon race. Ling Han's foot was still planted on Huai Jian, but his eyes turned towards this girl from the demon race, and his gaze involuntarily became tense. This was a 9th Lotus Second Leaf elite. Zishuang. This girl from the demon race pointed at herself. She possessed an incredibly voluptuous figure, shapely and seductive. Though she still had a tail, it was still a uniquely beautiful sight. Junior brother Ba, you're not really thinking of killing these junior brothers of mine, right? She laughed lightly, as if she had absolutely no plans to save Si Huangyun and Huai Jian. Yet Huai Jian and Si Huangyun were both very aware. The competition between them, the people under the heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity, was incredibly intense, especially when they were of the same cultivation level, because their cultivation resources were similar, which would definitely mean a harsh contest between them. This was also the deliberate arrangement of the heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity. This was just like raising goo, where only the strongest elite would stand out from the rest. Ling Han smiled slightly, and replied, "This man intended to kill me. Why can't I kill him? This is my junior brother. If you kill him, I can only kill you." Zishuang sighed, appearing to feel very regretful. This woman was very interesting. She made no mention of wanting to save Huai Jian, but rather only spoke of revenge. She was practically saying that she did not care at all about this junior brother, but because they were both of the Desolate Eternity's line, she had to do something, and eliminate his murderer. Moreover, even if I am no match for you, there are still 7 senior brothers and 2 senior sisters here. 7 of them are 9th Lotus Third Leaf, and 2 have already ascended to become ancestral kings. Junior brother Ba, are you going to kill everyone? She looked at Ling Han with her large eyes, which were shining brightly. In the eyes of a member of the demon race like herself, Ling Han was extremely handsome. Ling Han's demeanor was grave and stern, and though his body art had surpassed his cultivation level, it could match early stage 9th Lotus Third Leaf at most. It would be delusional to hope for even the slightest bit more. To say nothing of ancestral kings, even a 9th Lotus Third Leaf monarch star was enough trouble for him to contend with. However, he was not the kind of person that was used to threats either. With him exerting slight force with his foot, Huai Jian was instantly waving his limbs with all his might. Ling Han had placed his foot on the latter's throat, and a frightening pressure was transmitted, making him feel like death was really just around the corner. Junior brother Ba! Zishuang switched her expression, and smiled genially. In the future, we will all be family. A family naturally has to be harmonious, don't you think so? A smile slowly appeared on Ling Han's face as he said, "Senior sister is right." He slowly withdrew his foot, while Little Terror immediately loosened its fangs with a cry. With a leap, it darted next to his feet, rubbing against his leg, and looking completely like a cute pet that was begging for a rub. Zishuang showed a hint of wariness. Not only did Ling Han have heaven-defying strength, he could be flexible as well, and did not have the stubborn pride that an ordinary monarch star would usually have. If this kind of person became an enemy, that would be very, very troublesome. This is a wise action. She smiled dazzlingly. Under the banner of the heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity, there were a total of 19 disciples that were at the 9th Lotus. They all had a competitive relationship with one another, but if they fought alone, it was extremely likely that others would ally together to target them. Hence, she, too, wished to seek an ally, and as someone who was also of the demon race, and whose strength was incredibly powerful, Ling Han naturally was a very good candidate. Ling Han smiled as well. "Thank you for the compliment, senior sister. Follow me up the mountain, all of you." Zixuang did not even cast a second look at Si Huangyun and Feng Hailuan. As long as they were not dead, she couldn't be bothered to care. She led the way ahead of them, her behind swaying accompanied by captivating seduction. Even if they were angel race, holy beast, or insect race, they could not deny that this woman's figure was really extremely hot. There was no need to speak of Su Xing here, as his eyes had not been lifted from her all this while. It was no wonder that he would be attracted. There were not many monarch stars that could be worthy of him, and it was naturally even more difficult to find a beauty who was also from the demon race. No one gave any regard to Feng Hailuan and Si Huangyun. After a long while, they finally managed to get back to their feet. One was covered all over with bite wounds, while the other had both his legs broken, his abdomen ripped through, and at least half his head missing. "If I don't exact revenge, I will die. I will definitely tear this brat to pieces." The two of them made a declaration with gritted teeth. Exchanging a look, they both smirked. On the other side, Ling Han and his group followed Zixuang up the mountain, and after traveling for a very long while, the fog finally dispersed. Everyone stowed their respective tokens as well. Zixuang didn't use a token, for there was no such need. The line of Desolate Eternity had cultivated a unique cultivation technique, so they would not be affected by this fog. Otherwise, even an 18th Lotus Ancestral King would lose his way here. Because this was something set up by a heavenly venerate. "Come, have some tea first. Exalted Master's real self has been cultivating all this while, and he has left behind a sliver of thought that has been roaming outside his body. He should be returning in a few days." Zixuang smiled as she received them. This was a drawing room, and was not all that glorious or splendid, but it had an imposing air. In the drawing room, all the furniture was made of stone. It appeared to be shockingly old, exuding a feeling of age and history. "Tea!" Zixuang shouted lightly, and a servant came not too long after, bearing a tea tray. Ling Han and the others all looked surprised. It was not how astonishing this servant looked, or how exceedingly high his cultivation level was, but rather that this person was actually a human. A human! In the territory of the foreign realm, a human had actually appeared. This was a man that looked to be in his 30s. Docile and submissive, he looked completely like a loyal slave. Ling Han's heart involuntarily clenched. He had never expected that he would see a human here, and judging from the look of things, he seemed to have long forgotten the grudge with the foreign realm, and was filled with subservience. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.